Florida rise?
To nominate a candidate for Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Well, sometimes we have to do jobs that we don't really want to do. And sometimes we have to do jobs that we are called to do. And so, my colleagues, I rise to nominate the most talented, hardest working member of the Republican Conference, who just gave a speech with more vision than we have ever heard from the alternative. I'm nominating Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan is humble, perhaps today, humble to a fault. Maybe the right person for the job of Speaker of the House isn't someone who wants it so bad. Maybe the right person for the job of Speaker of the House isn't someone who has sold shares of themselves for more than a decade to get it. Maybe Jim Jordan is the right person for Speaker of the House because he is not beholden to the lobbyists and special interests who have corrupted this place and corrupted this nation under the leadership of both Republicans and Democrats. Maybe Jim Jordan would be the right person for Speaker of the House because he wouldn't fight us when we try to get a term limits bill on the floor. Maybe Jim Jordan would be the right person because he wouldn't fight us when we try to put a balanced budget on the floor and vote for it. And maybe Jim Jordan is the right person because he would endorse the plan that was built by the Texas delegation to finally secure our border. Mr. Jordan said in his nomination that there are certain bills that we have to pass to fix the problem. The challenge is the alternative has been someone voting for the very bills that have caused these problems. Mr. Jordan says that we cannot accept legislation like the omnibus, and I fully agree. And if Jim Jordan were Speaker of the House, if he were the leader of the Republican team, we wouldn't have that circumstance choking the economy of our country, increasing inflation, and diminishing the prospects of a better life for our fellow Americans. And finally, Mr. Jordan said we must engage in rigorous oversight. Every one of my Republican colleagues knows that the person who can lead that oversight effort, who works on it every day, who has the skill and the talent and the will, is Jim Jordan. I'm nominating him, and I'm voting for him.
The reading clerk will call the roll.
Sure. That wasn't on an existential.
He's definitely out of order, Madam Clerk. I say that because I know last night people were frustrated. They wanted to go to parties. They wanted to take pictures with their families. But honestly, we find ourselves here in this chamber for the second day, and we know we got work to do, but in some ways, there's no place I'd rather be. With the possible exception of Lambeau Field on Sunday, no place I'd rather be. But maybe with the excitement, some of you hadn't had an opportunity to check what's happening online, let me fill you in, or what's happening on Twitter, what the press is writing about. In some ways, they're salivating. There's headlines about the chaos, this and that. Yesterday, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle were tweeting their bags of popcorn that they had out. They love it. The schadenfreude is palpable. But I think my friends on the Democratic side misunderstand what's happening here. Sure, it looks messy, but democracy is messy. Democracy is messy by design. By design. And that's
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
To place a name in nomination for the position of Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
My friends, when Donald Trump was president, taxes were cut, regulations were slashed, energy was abundant, wages were rising, capital was returning from overseas to fund the dreams and ambitions of our fellow Americans, and the economy was roaring. What a contrast to what we have seen from this administration now. And so I rise to nominate Donald Trump for the position of Speaker of the House. And for all of the vitriol that we hear from the media and at times the left, there were great moments of bipartisanship under the Trump presidency. And the Democrat nominee for Speaker knows that well because he led valiantly on the efforts for criminal justice reform, and I was honored to join him. And I know no matter who's sitting in that Speaker chair, we got a lot of work to do on that very issue. We took a first step, but there's a second step and a third step to take, and I'm glad that we were able to work with President Trump, with Republicans, and with Democrats to provide real outcomes for Americans, to create greater prosperity and more opportunity. I also care deeply about President Trump's focus on our nation's veterans. It seemed for far too long on the campaign trail, veterans were disregarded, forgotten about. When we would get elected to office, their issues would not always rise and get center stage, but we were able to pass veterans accountability measures. We were able to actually get people fired at the VA who weren't doing their job. What a great thing that would be to extend and to continue to nourish. President Trump oriented our views on trade so that we actually put the American people first, not foreign interests abroad or special interests here at home. President Trump knew that we had to confront China, that China had already engaged in a trade war against us, but it was a war that we were surrendering, and so we started to fight back. He stood with our farmers. And on foreign policy, we stopped trying to find a new Jeffersonian democracy to build out of sand and blood and Arab militias in the Middle East. Matter of fact, President Trump, I believe, is the first president in my lifetime that didn't start any new wars. This is an issue that I know unites some elements of the right and left for the benefit of our communities.
Will the House be in order?
This government for far too long has been deeply corrupt. This town has been deeply corrupt. The way people get leadership positions and chairmanships and opportunities to be able to morally preen has been by accepting lobbyist and special interest money and redistributing that money as currency for favors. And that is not a criticism of either political party. It is a criticism of what we have allowed to happen in this place. And if we just go next man up on our side of the aisle, we will reify that corrupt system and we will abandon the people who are expecting us to fight for them. I have heard from my colleagues about all the important work we have to do, and it is my sincere fear that if we were to allow Mr. McCarthy to assume the speakership, that would not get done. That it would be business as usual, and the very same things that have paralyzed progress for both parties would continue to shackle us to never-ending failure. We can be better than that. We can raise our gaze indeed. We also have to restore to the Speaker's office an actual person that ought to be in the Speaker's office, not the squatter who is currently there. And if the architect of the Capitol is listening, I sent a letter, and I would like to know what the basis is to allow somebody to occupy the Speaker's office who comes in second place 10 straight times. Is there like some basis in law or rule or precedent for that? And so I nominate President Trump because we must make our country great again, and he can start by making the House of Representatives great again.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
To submit a name for nomination for the position of Speaker of the House.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague from California, Mr. Garcia, knows the incredibly high regard I hold him in. He is a patriot. I deeply, deeply admire him. But I must take some exception with some of the comments he made in his nomination of Mr. McCarthy. First, he said that Mr. McCarthy has earned the position. You only earn the position of Speaker of the House if you can get the votes. Mr. McCarthy doesn't have the votes today. He will not have the votes tomorrow, and he will not have the votes next week, next month, next year. And so one must wonder, Madam Clerk, is this an exercise in vanity for someone who has done the math, taken the counts, and is putting this institution through something that absolutely is avoidable? My colleague, Mr. Garcia, did not say this, but many of my other Republican colleagues have. They believe that Mr. McCarthy has earned the position of Speaker of the House because he raised $500 million to get Republicans elected.
The gentleman is not recognized.
Members are reminded not to.
Reminded not to engage in personalities against other members of the House.
Several believe that one earns the position of Speaker by raising enormous sums of money, and there is no doubt that the individual that was nominated by Mr. Garcia is the LeBron James of special interest fundraising in this town. There is nobody better, but I would suggest that there are qualifications for Speaker that are far more important. There are attributes that are far more important. Jim Jordan has those, and I am submitting his name for nomination at this time. I heard my colleague from California, Mr. Garcia, say that we seek pure, selfless intent, and I could not agree more with that assessment. Mr. Jordan, indeed, is reflective of pure, selfless intent. I don't know that the same can be said for the Republican alternative. Let's start with purity. Many of you have seen the reports that there are negotiations to determine whether or not on this side of the aisle there can be a deal, a meeting of the minds, a grand bargain that would allow us to proceed with the speakership. And I want all of my colleagues to know, regardless of your perspective on me, how impure some of those negotiations have gone. And I want the country to know. The principal goal of the people who are objecting to Mr. McCarthy on the Republican side is that we don't believe the rules of this place unlock the potential of all of the members to be able to cast votes on individual bills and to offer amendments on appropriations acts. And we're also concerned about spending that has ballooned our debt and borrowed against the future generations of American citizens. And Mr. McCarthy said, well, goodness, to the objectors, a lot of you want to be on the Oversight and Judiciary Committee, and you never submit your names to be on the Rules Committee or the Appropriations Committee. And so, gosh, if you'll get a list of folks who are willing to come early on fly-in days for rules, and folks who are willing to take on the extra burden of our appropriators who work so hard, then I'll certainly work to do that. And so we endeavored in good faith, in pure good faith, to create that list. And then what did Mr. McCarthy do? He went out to the media and came to other members of the conference and said, see, they just want jobs for themselves. That is not pure. Selflessness. Selflessness is not selling shares of yourself to the lobby corps and then doing their bidding at the expense of the American people. But there certainly is intent. And it's an intent driven almost exclusively by personal ambition, and that ambition is paralyzing the House now. Madam Clerk, at this time there is great trust in Mr. Jordan, and that's why I am nominating him, and there is insufficient trust in Kevin McCarthy. There are some who have been objecting to Mr. McCarthy who are working on perhaps changes to the rules, changes to circumstance that would convert the speakership from the great, awesome, powerful position it is now to more of a ceremonial position, almost akin to the Speaker in the British House of Commons. I referred to it previously as a straitjacket that some of us were trying to construct with better rules and better personnel because we do not trust Mr. McCarthy with power, because we know who he will use it for, and we are concerned it will not be for the American people. We trust Jim Jordan. I nominate him, and I'm going to vote for him.
McCarthy. Fulcher. McCarthy. Gaetz. Jordan. Gallagher. McCarthy. Gallego. Jeffries. Garamendi. Jeffries. Garbarino. McCarthy. Mike Garcia. McCarthy. Robert Garcia. Jeffries. Garcia of Illinois. Jeffries. Garcia of Texas. Jeffries. Jimenez. McCarthy. Golden of Maine. Jeffries. Goldman of New York. Jeffries. Gomez. Jeffries. Tony Gonzalez. McCarthy. Vicente Gonzalez. Jeffries. Good of Virginia. Jordan.
And from Florida, Mr. Gaetz for 5 minutes.
On this very floor in January, the whole world witnessed a historic contest for House Speaker. I rise today to serve notice. Mr. Speaker, you are out of compliance with the agreement that allowed you to assume this role. The path forward for the House of Representatives is to either bring you into immediate total compliance or remove you pursuant to a motion to vacate the chair. We have had no vote on term limits or on balanced budgets as the agreement demanded and required. There's been no full release of the January 6 tapes. As you promised, there has been insufficient accountability for the Biden crime family, and instead of cutting spending to raise the debt limit, you relied on budgetary gimmicks and rescissions so that you ultimately ended up serving as the valet to underwrite Biden's debt and advance his spending agenda. Mr. Speaker, you boasted in January that we would use the power of the subpoena and the power of the purse. But here we are, 8 months later, and we haven't even sent the first subpoena to Hunter Biden. That's how you know that the rushed and somewhat rattled performance you just saw from the Speaker isn't real. At this point, during Democrat control over the House of Representatives, they had already brought in Don Jr. 3 times. And we haven't even sent the first subpoena to Hunter Biden. Power of the subpoena and power of the purse. Only thing the 118th Congress is known for at this point is electing Kevin McCarthy Speaker and underwriting Biden's debt. And unfortunately, there's only one of those things we can remediate at this time. Power of the purse. Our leadership right now is asking us to vote for a continuing resolution. A vote for a continuing resolution is a vote to continue the Green New Deal, a vote to continue inflationary spending, and in the most troubling of fashions, a vote for a continuing resolution is a vote to continue the election interference of Jack Smith. Mr. Speaker, we told you how to use the power of the purse. Individual, single-subject spending bills that would allow us to have specific review, programmatic analysis, and that would allow us to zero out the salaries of the bureaucrats who have broken bad, targeted President Trump, or cut sweetheart deals for Hunter Biden. September 30th is rapidly approaching, and you have not put us in a position to succeed. There is no way to pass all the individual appropriations bills now, and it's not like we didn't know when September 30th was going to show up on the calendar. I must be better, you must be better, and this House must be better, for it is the last best hope for tens of millions of Republicans. We demand real oversight against this weaponized government. Just look at the bribery. If tens of millions of dollars flowing from foreign corrupt people into the bank accounts of the Biden family wasn't enough for actual impeachment, why were we even looking? Joe Biden deserves impeachment for converting the vice presidency into an ATM machine for virtually his entire family. We all see it. We all know it. Now, moments ago, Speaker McCarthy endorsed an impeachment inquiry. This is a baby step following weeks of pressure from House conservatives to do more. We must move faster. Now, I will concede that the votes I have called for will likely fail: term limits, balanced budgets, maybe even impeachment. I am prepared for that eventuality because at least if we take votes, the American people get to see who's fighting for them and who's willing to tolerate more corruption and business as usual. Mr. Speaker, dust off our written January agreement. You have a copy. Reflect on the spirit of that agreement and build on the start that we had moments ago. Begin to comply. No continuing resolutions, individual spending bills or bust, votes on balanced budgets and term limits, subpoenas for Hunter Biden and the members of the Biden family who've been grifting off of this country, and the impeachment for Joe Biden that he so richly deserves. Do these things or face a motion to vacate the chair. And let me alert the country, A motion to vacate might not pass at first, but it might before the 15th vote. And if Democrats bail out McCarthy, as they may do, then I will lead the resistance to this uniparty and the Biden, McCarthy, Jeffries government that they are attempting to build. I know that Washington isn't a town where people are known for keeping their word. Well, Speaker McCarthy, I'm here to hold you to yours. I yield back.
Hey, how you doing? So the Speaker said this morning, why don't they bring the F in motion? So are you going to bring the F in motion?
Well, I'm concerned for the Speaker that he seems to be a little rattled and unhinged in a time when we need focus and strong effort. Whether or not McCarthy faces a motion to vacate is within his own hands. All he has to do is come into compliance with the deal we made in January. That's a vote on term limits, a vote on a balanced budget, and single subject spending bills. That is the way out of this. And frankly, if I don't demand that of him, then I sort of look like I wasn't serious in January, and I think you and your viewers know that I was.
So do you? I mean, he says you're working. He says you're working with Democrats. Oops. He says you're working with Democrats. Is that right?
No. I mean, look, Kevin McCarthy is the one who worked with Democrats to pass the debt deal. If there's a work with Democrats yellow brick road, it is most well traveled by Kevin McCarthy.
And then is this going to happen? What, next week? This vote to vacate.
Well, again, I've said a motion to vacate is not a certainty, Manu. What I've conveyed to you is that this is within Kevin McCarthy's power to avoid if he's just willing to stick to the deal that he made in January.
Do you have the votes to not come out? Do you have 5 Republicans?
Well, I think I spoke to that quite clearly on the floor, that I didn't expect that I would initially, but I bet I'll have them before the 15th vote.
Do you think did that come up in the meeting just now?
We were discussing the appropriations bills and our work to get those single subject appropriations bills. I'm eager to see that.
Last question. Hunter Biden just got indicted. Do you have any reaction to that on a false statement and gun charge?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, getting Hunter Biden on the gun charge is like getting Jeffrey Dahmer on littering.
Thank you.
If and when you're ready to trigger that motion?
Yeah.
You do, okay.
When is that going to happen?
I just answered your exact colleague from
now
your
we're on camera.
camera.
Now you're on
question
camera.
on the exact question.
Okay, well, what is the on-camera answer?
To what question?
To when are you going to move to vacate?
Well, whether a motion to vacate is filed is, I don't want these guys to trip.
Okay, thank you.
Whether a motion to vacate is filed is still entirely within the hands of Speaker McCarthy. All he has to do is come into compliance with the deal he made in January to become Speaker. Now, there is progress. In the last few hours, there's real momentum behind the concept of abandoning governing by continuing resolution and instead moving to an agreed-upon top-line spending number for the federal government, and then nestling within that top line single-subject individual spending bills, as I've been calling for the better part of a year. We have a meeting in the next several hours where I hope and expect that our leadership will lean into the very paradigm that I've laid out to be able to root out this woke and weaponized government.
Because you said initially that even a CR on the floor would be enough to trigger it. Do you still have, is that still your position, that even if he puts a CR on the floor, you'll go forward?
The report I'm giving you is that I believe we've heard the eulogy for governing by CR. That's not to say there won't be a resurrection, but the momentum in the Republican House right now is to move away from lumping all of these disparate agencies of government together in one vote. That's a bad way, that's an unserious way to govern, and instead setting a top line consistent with our agreement in January, and then doing single subject appropriations bills pursuant to that top line.
So if it's a 1 month CR and you agree on a top line, that would not trigger vacate.
Mono, I don't know how many times I have to tell you this, but we are done governing by CR. I am done governing by CR.
But they still have to do a CR. You acknowledge they're going to have to do a CR.
I do not. Something appears to not be getting through.
Okay.
No, CR is the position of a requisite number of Republicans. Mm-hmm. Now, if Republican moderates want to go team up with Democrats and sign a discharge petition to take over the floor with Democrats, well, they'll be signing their own political death warrant, and they'll be handing it to their executioner, because it'll be the very Democrats they act in concert with who will hunt them during the upcoming election season. It won't be us. It'll be the people that they... So I can't stop someone from signing their own political death warrant and handing it to their executioner, but if that is what governs this country, then let's go ahead and get to it. And then I think conservatives can cast a competing vision, and I would be a part of leading that.
And if Speaker McCarthy relies on Democrats,
If Speaker McCarthy relies on Democrats to pass a continuing resolution, I would call the Capitol moving truck to his office pretty soon, because my expectation would be he'd be out of the Speaker's office quite promptly. I also want to point out that while spending is the real thrust of the January agreement, it is not the only element. I also am demanding an up or down vote on congressional term limits. I am demanding an up or down vote on a balanced budget amendment. And Speaker McCarthy has not been compliant with that. He has not signaled a willingness to be compliant, even though those exact things are on a written agreement that Kevin McCarthy essentially acquiesced to.
So what is the actual deadline to file a motion to vacate? I know you said that you have these demands if the Speaker doesn't fulfill them, but what's your deadline, your drop-dead deadline?
Well, I would say this government funding dispute presents a real crucible to make that decision. And right now, my goal, or I would say over the last several days, my principal goal in that battle has been to kill the continuing resolution that was offered by several of my colleagues. That's dead. We've buried it. It's 6 feet under. Now what I'm trying to kill is the concept that we are ever going to govern by continuing resolution. And I'm sensing some progress toward that end.
So you're sensing there's going to be a government shutdown?
Yes, that we will have a government shutdown, and it is absolutely Speaker McCarthy's fault. We cannot blame Joe Biden for not having moved our individual spending bills. We cannot blame House Democrats. We can't even blame Chuck Schumer in the Senate. We were entirely in control of whether or not to be on schedule with single subject spending bills, and we didn't. And that's not a bug of the system. That's a feature of the system, because the lobbyists and the special interests who own Kevin McCarthy want us to have this all jammed up at the end so that power is centralized and then the donors get paid off and the interests of the American people get subjugated. That's why we haven't had individual spending bills since like 1997.
Okay, so
Does anyone else have a question?
Thank you.
I came up late, so sorry if you already answered this. When are you planning to bring forward the motion to vacate?
You are late, and I've significantly answered that. Any other questions?
I just want to, I guess the Speaker told me today that he's going to move on a CR no matter what. He's going to get it done. It might not be tomorrow, it might be next week. So if he can't get it done by the deadline, that's when you'll file the motion?
Well, Speaker McCarthy hasn't really shown highly proficient at counting votes this week. So when he tells you he's going to get something done, I would probably ask what the coalition is that's going to facilitate that. If it's a coalition that involves using Democrats to roll conservatives to advance Joe Biden's spending priorities, then that will likely mark the beginning of the series of votes on a motion to vacate.
What if he flips enough Republicans?
We're not going to have sufficient Republican support for a continuing resolution.
have you talked to him since you made all these threats about him?
I think that categorizing them as threats is a bit pejorative. I simply seek
Threat for
compliance.
speakership.
I want compliance. Whether or not Kevin McCarthy is speaker remains in his hands.
Have you spoken to him?
Do you anticipate a shutdown would last if House Republicans did follow your approach?
I think that it would be a shutdown that we could endure. We would have to own it. We would have to hold the leaders accountable who brought it forward. But the most important thing right now, my most important objective, is to shatter this notion that continuing resolutions will govern the body.
How many no's have you whipped?
I don't whip anybody. I just try to
Sounds
encourage.
like you are.
Whip's a
How
harsh
many do you
word.
know of?
I'm an encourager. I'll take care of you guys.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman.
In the state of Florida.
Okay, you're recognized.
The gentleman's right. You are your record. And our record in this country right now is $33 trillion in debt, facing $2 trillion annual deficits. We're in so much debt. We're driving up deficits so fast. We are devaluing American money so rapidly that in America today, you can't even bribe Democrat senators with cash alone. You need to bring gold bars to get the job done, just so that the bribes hold value. My friends, I am extremely in favor of this rule because this rule moves us onto single subject spending bills. And this is the only way to liberate this House and this country from the scourge of governing by continuing resolution and omnibus legislation. It is an insult to our governing authority to have the Senate lash Ukraine funding to the reauthorization of the FAA, and by the way, every other thing in government, the American people know that in our state legislatures throughout this land, there is a maturity and a seriousness to set a top line, balanced budget number, and then appropriate to each of the agencies of government independently. And the fact that we don't do that is not a bug of the system, it's a feature of the system. And the one thing I agree with my Democrat colleagues on is that for the last 8 months, this House has been poorly led. And we own that, and we have to do something about it. And you know what? My Democrat colleagues will have an opportunity to do something about that too. And we will see if they bail out our failed speaker. I yield back.
Yeah, the gentleman.
It sounds like you got into an exchange with the speaker. What happened?
I asked him whether or not he was paying those influencers to post negative things about me online.
He said he wouldn't. He said he wouldn't waste time on you.
Yeah, that is what he said.
I really appreciate it. So you have been threatening to topple McCarthy, issue a motion to vacate the speakership if he worked with Democrats to fund the government with a clean CR, a clean government spending bill, which is exactly what he did on Friday and Saturday. The House gavels back in tomorrow at noon. Are you going to make a motion to vacate?
Speaker McCarthy made an agreement with House conservatives in January, and since then he has been in brazen, repeated material breach of that agreement. This agreement that he made with Democrats to really blow past a lot of the spending guardrails we'd set up is a last straw. And then overnight I learned that Kevin McCarthy had a secret deal with Democrats on Ukraine. So as he was baiting Republicans to vote for a continuing resolution without Ukraine money, saying that we were going to jam the Senate on Ukraine, he then turns around and makes a secret deal. Now, I know you and I probably have different views on U.S. involvement in Ukraine, but however you think about that question, it should be subject to open review, analysis, and not some backroom deal.
So I do motion to vacate tomorrow?
I do intend to file a motion to vacate against Speaker McCarthy this week. I think we need to rip off the Band-Aid. I think we need to move on with new leadership that can be trustworthy. Look, the one thing everybody has in common is that nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy. He lied to Biden. He lied to House conservatives. He had appropriators marking to a different number altogether. And the reason we were backed up against this shutdown politics is not a bug of the system, it's a feature. Kevin McCarthy's goal was to make multiple contradictory promises, to delay everything, back us up against shutdown politics, and at the end of the day, blow past the spending guardrails he'd agreed to.
So how many Republicans do you think will be with you in your motion to vacate? Because obviously for people at home who don't know, you need 218 votes to get him out of the speakership. You don't have 218 Republican votes. You're going to need Democrats. Let's start with the Republicans. How many Republicans do you have?
Well, enough so that when you host this show next week, if Kevin McCarthy is still the Speaker of the House, he will be serving at the pleasure of the Democrats. He will be working for the Democrats. The only way Kevin McCarthy is Speaker of the House at the end of this coming week is if Democrats bail him out. Now, they probably will. I actually think that when you believe in nothing, as Kevin McCarthy does, everything's negotiable.
Okay, but
I think he'll cut a deal with the Democrats.
Let's be honest here, though, because if you succeed in vacating him, you also will have to make a deal with the Democrats. You also will have to get Democratic votes to kick him out.
Absolutely. I will make no deal with Democrats and concede no terms to them. I actually think Democrats should vote against Speaker McCarthy for free. I don't think I should have to deal them anything.
So you're not going to cut any deals with him?
Absolutely not. And I don't think that any Republicans that share my view on Speaker McCarthy would cut deals with Democrats. But here's the thing. I'm done owning Kevin McCarthy. Right? We made a deal at the end of in January to allow him to assume the speakership, and I'm not owning him anymore because he doesn't tell the truth. And so if Democrats want to own Kevin McCarthy by bailing him out, I can't stop him, but then he'll be their speaker, not mine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to raise a question. What was the secret side deal on Ukraine? House Democrats and President Biden have said that as Speaker McCarthy was asking Republicans to vote for a continuing resolution so as to avoid having to take the Senate's plus up in Ukraine money, that the Speaker of the House was actually cutting a side deal to bring Ukraine legislation to this floor with President Biden and House Democrats. So let me get this straight. To extend Joe Biden's spending and Joe Biden's policy priorities, the Speaker of the House gave away to Joe Biden the money for Ukraine that Joe Biden wanted. It is going to be difficult for my Republican friends to keep calling President Biden feeble while he continues to take Speaker McCarthy's lunch money in every negotiation. The Speaker of the House has responded to these reports of a secret side deal on money for Ukraine, opaquely stating that he still wants to fund Ukraine and our border. I have a few replies to this statement. First, the Speaker's statement confirms the existence of a secret deal. And I have talked to members of our own leadership who have said they didn't even know that Speaker McCarthy was negotiating a secret side deal outside of our conference, outside of his own leadership team, for the sake of Ukraine. Second, Ukraine has lost the support of a majority of the majority. The last time there was a freestanding Ukraine vote on this floor, it was last week. 101 Republicans voted for it, 117 Republicans voted against it. According to the Hastert rule, which Speaker McCarthy agreed to in January, you cannot use Democrats to roll a majority of the majority, certainly on something as consequential as Ukraine. So for all the crocodile tears about what may happen later this week about a motion to vacate, working with the Democrats is a yellow brick road that has been paved by Speaker McCarthy, whether it was the debt limit deal, the CR, or now the secret deal on Ukraine. Third, this is swampy log rolling. The American people deserve single subject bills. I get that a lot of folks might disagree with my perspectives on the border or on Ukraine, but can we at least agree that no matter how you feel about Ukraine or the southern border, they each deserve the dignity of their own consideration and should not be rolled together where they might pass where each individually wouldn't? This is what we're trying to get away from. This is the spirit of the January agreement we made with the Speaker. No more lashing these disparate issues together so that the American people's interests are subjugated here on the floor of the House. You know how we should stand up for our border? Demand that the United States Senate take up our single subject appropriation bill that funded the border. It created Republican unity. We voted for it. It has the policy demands that the continuing resolution that Speaker McCarthy advocated for on this floor did not. Our DHS funding bill requires E-Verify. And then hours later, after we passed that, the Speaker wanted us to vote for a continuing resolution that didn't include E-Verify. Retreat is never a strategy to win anything. So, Mr. Speaker, just tell us. Just tell us. What was in the secret Ukraine side deal? What commitments were made to President Biden to continue the spending of President Biden in exchange for doing things for President Biden? It is becoming increasingly clear who the Speaker of the House already works for, and it's not the Republican conference. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that these questions be answered soon, because there may be other votes coming today or later this week that could be implicated by the answers to these questions. Members of the Republican Party might vote differently on a motion to vacate if they heard what the Speaker had to share with us about his secret side deal with Joe Biden on Ukraine. I'll be listening. Stay tuned. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields.
Hey guys, heads up.
Welcome back. As you can see, we canceled the district work period. We're staying in Congress to get our work done. We've got 2 more appropriation bills to take up, ledge grants and energy and water this week. We want to continue to finish all of our work. We've got a short time period here, about 45 days to get our work done. That's my entire focus. Hopefully the Senate will bring up an appropriation bill. Kept the government open so we can get this job done, focusing on eliminating the wasteful spending, the wokeism, and most importantly, securing this border. I know I've got a lot of members on the other side of the aisle. I was on a Sunday show this weekend, and following me was the governor of New York. She brought up the border, how it's wider, a much different position than what the president is at. So I think the people across the country want to see this border secure. With that,
Mr. Speaker, do you expect that Democrats will be needed to help you in the motion to vacate vote? And if you don't win that vote, will you put yourself up for the speakership again in this new speaker's race?
you'd have to ask them. I don't know. I'm just going to focus on doing the work I'm supposed to do. I think this is a question to the institution itself. I know in the past the other leaders together all believe that this should never be in play, but I'm not worried. I've done my job. I'll continue to do my job.
Where do you feel like, if there's going to be a vote on that, would you prefer it to happen tonight, or would you like to see that happen in the next 48 hours?
I don't worry about that. I'm more interested in getting the appropriation bills passed.
Where do you feel your support is right now in the conference?
I feel my support is very strong.
More broadly, Mr. Speaker, what were the conversations like with the conference on Saturday when you guys decided to change course on funding, and subsequently, because you have had this criticism? And what have you been hearing from your members about the way you chose to handle this?
Well, I've heard a lot of criticism frustrated inside the conference about having the most conservative stopgap measure that would secure the border and cut spending, and we couldn't pass it. So then we sat there and we talked, and we were all frustrated because there wasn't very many options as a majority if you can't control your own destiny. We watched the frustration for the weeks past where people would hijack the floor and not let us pass anything, or not let us bring up the appropriation bills time and again. So then we're sitting here about ready to go into a shutdown where you're going to have to look at the men and women who serve in the military, the men and women on the border, that they're questioning whether they're going to get paid. The challenge with the FAA, because the House has passed the FAA bill and the Senate again has not done anything there. So there are very few options to do. And listening to everybody, they elected me to be Speaker, so I made a decision. I thought it was best to keep the government open while we finish our work. You look inside the troops' eyes, and how are you going to tell them they're not going to get paid when they're risking their lives? Because the Senate hasn't done their jobs and we haven't finished ours. So we'll move forward and make sure we got that done. And it was a gamble to do it. There was no guarantee that the Democrats would vote for it. You saw them scramble. Don't know whether we had enough vote, no time to whip it. But you know, at times in places like this, I need to make decisions. And I made a decision and went with it. I stand by my
Speaker, do you intend to speak to Jeffries about the motion to vacate over to Democrats?
I haven't talked to I did talk to Jeffries the day we had that vote either.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Sir, do you have enough votes to pass these appropriations bills coming up next week?
I don't know. I would have thought you'd have enough votes to pass a continuing resolution with government about to shut down, where you're securing the border, you're cutting spending, and you couldn't get enough votes for that. So each day is a different day. I'll work through it.
The president has implied that you made a promise that appropriating funding coming to the floor.
I don't think the president implied that at all. I hadn't talked to the president. What I have always said before, I am for weapons for Ukraine. That's how I have voted. I've been very clear in the process that he's got a problem, that he has not shown a clear message of how we're going to win and what is our mission. I've asked, and what we promised is bring your people down to talk to our people where we're living. And I've been very clear about American border takes priority. There are more Americans being killed because of the southern border than they are for Ukraine. I believe Ukraine is very important. I have always supported arming Ukraine. It's not sending money to Ukraine, that's arming Ukraine with the weaponry to defend it. But I think it's very important that a number of Americans are dying to get the border done.
Just to
now, there are things that I have to do inside when we were doing the continuing resolution. I want to make sure there's ability that, like any agency, we don't cause any problems with flexibility of moving the money around. If there's a problem there, I will correct it.
Just to clarify what you said, are you saying that you will not cut a deal with Democrats in order to stay as Speaker?
Look, I think this is about the institution. I think it's too important. So anytime that somebody has an ethics complaint and they can't get the way they want about it, they want to roll up and the inside's going to be part with 5 people inside that. I don't think that's good for the House. I believe Nancy Pelosi, for the last 2 speakers, has always came in and said, this isn't good for the House. I have to correct it, so.
Are you going to change the
If you end up having this motion to vacate, is there if you win on a motion to vacate, do you think that silences this block of people who held up the floor, frustrated your conference? I mean, do you kind of want to win that vote to prove this point?
Look, I want to win the vote so we can finish the job for the American people, but there are certain people who have done this from the day we've come in. I want to be conservative that shows how to govern. I think that's important to the country. I think that's important to our party. And most important, to get this job done. Unfortunately, if we sit around and wait for the Senate, nothing has happened. We have Democrats there that don't want to do anything. I want to be a conservative that governs. That's why we put the most conservative stopgap measure that would secure our border and cut funding, cut the spending, and we couldn't get enough. You've got to be able to govern if you're a conservative.
Do you think you'll change the motion to vacate rule when you try to do that?
I'm focused on getting the job done. I'm proud of the record of what we've been able to accomplish so far. We've got a lot more to do, and I don't have to worry about the other things. Do your job, and good things will happen.
Just to open up a
time frame in mind for the Ukraine vote?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Gaetz, why didn't you go forward right now? And are you backing off your plans to push him out of the speakership?
No one's in town yet. It's Monday on a fly-in day at noon. I think we'll have more folks later this afternoon.
Congressman Gaetz,
plan to do it today?
Speaker McCarthy said he will survive this. Should he be that confident?
Well, he's probably right. As I said on CNN and on ABC this past weekend, Kevin McCarthy's true coalition partner on all things of substance has been the Democrats this Congress. He worked with Democrats on the debt limit bill, and only Democrats are really campaigning on that bill. Republicans aren't campaigning on the debt limit bill. That was a Democrat bill, passed with mostly Democrat votes. Then we get to the appropriations process, and Speaker McCarthy purposefully delayed us. He tried to back us up against shutdown politics. He tried to not pass single subject spending bills, and at the end of the day, he had to utilize Democrats to pass a continuing resolution. So if Kevin McCarthy works for Democrats and utilizes Democrats in order to keep power, that would be consistent with everything we've seen from him.
If you lose,
personal for you.
For some people, policy failures are recast as personal because their own failures are personally embarrassing to them. This isn't personal. I can cite to you the specific elements of House rules that have been violated. Kevin McCarthy agreed to a rule that we would have 72 hours to read legislation. He blew past that. Kevin McCarthy agreed to a rule that we would not put anything over $100 million on the suspension agenda so that it couldn't be amended. He blew past that. Kevin McCarthy agreed to the Hastert rule, which is that you would never use the Democrats to roll a majority of the majority. On the last Ukraine supplemental, 101 Republicans voted for it, 117 Republicans voted against it. So does this sound personal to you? I'm pointing to specific things that Kevin agreed to that he hasn't complied with. He's just trying to subjugate his real and significant breaches of our agreement as some sort of personal dispute, but that's just more about him than it says about what we're trying to do to change Washington.
Mr. Gaetz, if you lose this vote, Mr. Gaetz, if you lose this vote.
How many people do you believe share your sentiment among House Republicans or in the House overall?
I think tens of millions of Americans share my sentiment. And if you go look at Newt Gingrich and Mark Levin trying to attack me online, it is an avalanche of criticism from their own supporters and their own followers and listeners, where those folks are standing with me, not some of these folks who are with McCarthy. Now,
can you get more than 5 or 6 Republicans to sign on to this?
Well, we'll see, and we'll see where the votes lie. That's a great thing about having.
If you lose this vote, will you continue to do this? And are you worried about throwing this institution into chaos, paralyzing an institution that your party runs?
You know what I think paralyzes us? Continuing to govern by continuing resolution and omnibus. You know what I think throws this institution into chaos? Marching us toward the dollar not being the global reserve currency anymore. You talk about chaos as if it's me forcing a few votes and filing a few motions. Real chaos is when the American people have to go through the austerity that is coming if we continue to have $2 trillion annual deficits. You don't know chaos until you've seen where this Congress and this uniparty is bringing us. Chaos is not forcing us. What?
Who would you want to see as speaker?
Yeah, look, we have a lot of talented people in our conference. There's probably 100 Republicans in Congress that I would vote for a speaker, and maybe 100 Republicans throughout the country that I would vote for. Remember, the speaker doesn't have to be.
Like who?
Hold on. Excuse me. I'm finishing. I'm finishing answering your question. But if you interrupt it, then the other people can't use my answer. Then they just get you asking questions, and they don't want to put you on because you're not an anchor or a reporter for their network. So the answer to your question is that we have a lot of folks in Congress who I think would be very capable to serve as Speaker. We need to rebuild trust. And so I think we need someone who can connect the most conservative features of our conference to the most moderate features of our conference. And I understand that. I'm not running for Speaker. I understand that it might not be someone who agrees with me on every position, but it is awkward to talk about names until we understand how Mr. Scalise comes out of his treatment for blood cancer. I am not the type of person that just says you blow by somebody because they're getting a medical treatment.
Just to follow up on Monty's address, you didn't obviously move this resolution today here. Some are saying, well, you're going to maybe string this along for a few days. Tell us parliamentarily what your goal is. Are you going to drop this at 2 o'clock? Are you going to wait for the answers to your questions and then drop this Wednesday, Thursday? Explain the timing of this.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing it this week.
Has
President Trump talked to you about this?
On Manu's question, if this does fail, will you bring this up again?
Yeah.
How often? Like every day? I mean, this would, do you think that you could win this vote eventually? And are you going to keep doing it until you think that you have the votes?
Well, like I've said, it took Speaker McCarthy 15 votes to become the Speaker. So until I get to 14 or 15, I don't think I'm being any more dilatory than he was.
Some of your colleagues say that they want to change the motion to vacate rule after you bring it forward, saying that one person shouldn't be allowed to do this. Obviously, that was an agreement that you came to in January. What do you say to those colleagues who want to change the motion to vacate? These are GOP colleagues.
It's certainly within the prerogative of my colleagues to offer any change to the rules that they would like. That would be subject to a vote on the House floor, and there's a procedure and a process to do that. The rules aren't written in stone, and so we'll see how that goes.
Have you spoken to President Trump about this?
I have.
And what was his advice to you?
I think I'm going to keep that between the two of us.
Have you talked to Speaker McCarthy?
Why are you waiting?
Excellent
Why are
catch.
you waiting for later this week?
Chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
I extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House.
Does the gentleman first yield back his 1-minute speech?
I do.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida now seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House.
The gentleman will state the form of his resolution.
Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. Resolved that the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives is hereby declared to be vacant.
Under Rule 9, a resolution offered from the floor by a member other than the majority leader or the minority leader as a question of the privileges of the House has immediate precedence only at a time designated by the chair within 2 legislative days after the resolution is properly noticed. Pending that designation, the form of the resolution noticed by the gentleman from Florida will appear in the record at this point. The chair will not at this point determine whether the resolution constitutes a question of privilege. That determination will be made at the time designated for consideration of the resolution. The chair will now continue with 1-minute speech. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
You'll have to wait a minute.
Mr. Gaetz, how many Republicans do you have with you in this effort?
Well, I have enough Republicans where at this point next week, one of two things will happen. Kevin McCarthy won't be the Speaker of the House, or he'll be the Speaker of the House working at the pleasure of the Democrats. And I'm at peace with either result because the American people deserve to know who governs them. Sorry, I'm going to let her have a question.
Yeah, so you've made it clear that if this fails, you will try again. How soon would that happen?
Well, I'm not so pessimistic as to immediately accept that it'll fail. I think that's the likely outcome. But, you know, this won't be the only time. That's probably all I'll say on that.
Has the Speaker talked to you, reached out to you at all in any way, touch you on the floor just now?
Yeah, he hasn't talked to me since he appointed me to the National Defense Conference Committee, and we talked about some of our aligned defense priorities, but that was some weeks ago.
What do you think it means that there's a number of Republicans now that say they're keeping an open mind to the motion to vacate?
Well, I hold no malice toward any Republican who doesn't support the motion to vacate. I believe the basis for the motion to vacate is Kevin McCarthy's repeated breach of the agreement that he made in January. Just look at the breach that we've seen over the last few weeks. He blew past the pre-COVID spending top line he agreed to. He put a bill on the floor to fund the entire government without 72 hours to review it in violation of the agreement he made. He said that there would never be a bill on the floor of the House that spent more than $100 million without the opportunity for amendment. And yet, the last continuing resolution violated that agreement as well. He also agreed to a rule that he would never use the Democrats to roll a majority of the majority. But in the last vote on Ukraine, we had a majority of the majority vote no, and yet that was not something that the leadership honored. They used Democrat votes to send more money to Ukraine. And maybe the last straw for me was learning that Kevin McCarthy had created a secret side deal with President Biden on Ukraine while we were in the middle of this government funding battle. A secret side deal on Ukraine is not what the American people want to see out of a Republican speaker.
He denied that.
If it's likely to fail as you expected, what did you accomplish through this?
Well, I think the American people deserve to know the coalition that really governs them. And Kevin McCarthy likes to pretend that he makes coalition with conservatives. But all he really does is break his word with conservatives. The coalition that really runs this country is the Uniparty. It is the Biden, McCarthy, Jeffries government, and that is what we will demonstrate with this vote.
If you succeed, who are you going to have? Who do you
expect that he made a side deal on Ukraine with Biden?
Well, because Joe Biden said he made a side deal. House Democrats said he made a side deal. And when the Speaker's office was asked about a side deal, they made some opaque reference to wanting to support Ukraine and do border funding. And as I said in my remarks on the floor earlier today, regardless of how you feel about Ukraine money or border money, these two things should not be lumped together. They deserve their own dignity and their own vote. And the people are tired of seeing the ways of Washington that jam everything together in order to really frustrate actual legislators.
If you succeed, McCarthy's almost certainly going to put himself up as a candidate for Speaker again. And that may mean there's no one who can get 218 votes. Are you prepared to go through that possibility with no one getting 218 votes?
Well, I would think that if it took Kevin McCarthy 15 rounds to become Speaker, and after 8 months of a failed speakership, and after a successful removal vote, as your hypothesis would portend, that he would take a hint.
Do you have someone?
Are you talking to any Democrats about this? If it were serious, you'd be trying to convince them.
Look, I have made no deal with Democrats because I believe that Democrats should vote against Kevin McCarthy for free. It's Kevin McCarthy who's out there offering deals to Democrats. So if there's a deal made with Democrats, the only deal is to make one with McCarthy. Because I'm not offering anything and won't offer anything. And by the way, if the Democrats want to own Kevin McCarthy, they can have him. Because one thing I'm at peace with is when we stand here a week from now, I won't own Kevin McCarthy anymore. He won't belong to me. So if the Democrats want to adopt him, they can adopt him.
If you're successful, who would be your alternative? Who would you be putting up there if you're successful?
Look, our number 2 is Steve Scalise. I think very highly of Steve Scalise. I would vote for Steve Scalise. I would probably vote for at least 100 Republicans in our caucus and maybe 100 other Americans out there who wouldn't necessarily need to be a member of the body to be considered for the speakership. But I am not going to pass over Steve Scalise just because he has blood cancer and is going through treatment.
What would you say to members who have worked so hard to try and get these appropriation bills through? That's finally happening. Now they say they don't want to be distracted from that. What do you say to those members who don't want to vote against McCarthy for that reason?
Well, mostly I would say you're welcome, because we weren't endeavoring on the appropriations process earnestly until we held a political gun to the Speaker's head last week. We left for a 6-week vacation, and we'd only passed one of our appropriations bills, the Veterans Bill. If Kevin McCarthy was serious about appropriations, we'd have been here all of July, we would have been here in August, and we would have been doing the people's work, passing their budget. The American people are tired of Washington, D.C. not having a budget, running $2 trillion annual deficits, sitting atop a $33 trillion debt. And if this country's going down, I'm going down fighting. I'll give you a follow-up.
I mean, it's happening now, right? Y'all were supposed to be back home in your districts. That hasn't happened. There are appropriation bills on the calendar. I know it might have taken a while to get here, but you're here. And so what do you say to your colleagues who say we can't support this because we want to get this done? We want to get the government funded.
Well, I would suggest if we were real serious about that process, we wouldn't be having 4-day work weeks. I mean, we started votes tonight at 6:30 p.m. on a Monday. Most Americans don't start work at 6:30 p.m. on a Monday and end a few hours later, right? So I don't believe that the level of effort that you're seeing out of the Congress this week is reflective of the momentum that we had built previously.
But you're going to need Democrats. You're going to need Democrats to vote with you to oust McCarthy, and you're criticizing McCarthy for having to potentially need Democrats to keep him in the job. I mean, aren't you pretty much doing the exact same thing here?
Mono, the yellow brick road of working with Democrats has been paved, constructed, engineered, and architected by Kevin McCarthy. Look no further than the debt limit deal, a deal he passed with Democrats. Look no further than the last continuing resolution, which he passed with Democrats. And by the way, if he's able to stay in power, it will be him working for the Democrats, continuing to do their bidding. So this is a revealing exercise, and I think it'll show the country who's really in
Just
charge.
to follow up on that, though, most Republicans still do support McCarthy. So why bring this up if you don't have the support of most of your conference?
Well, he doesn't have my support anymore, and he doesn't have the support of a requisite number of Republicans to continue as the Republican Speaker. Now, he may continue as the House Speaker, and he may continue as a Speaker of the Democrats and some sort of uniparty coalition, but he is not going to be a Speaker in power as a consequence of Republican votes based on the number of people who are going to be with me.
Is this like a personal disagreement you have with McCarthy, or is this solely just on...
You know, it's so funny that I come out here, and I've been doing this for a great number of days with all of you, and I lay out in Technicolor the specific areas of breach of the agreement, breaching the 72-hour rule, breaching the suspension rule, blowing past the top lines, not passing single subject spending bills, and yet the McCarthy operation continues to try to make this some sort of personal beef. No one seems to be real eager in engaging me on the substance of my argument, which is that we need single subject spending bills, we need to return to pre-COVID spending. But some people try to make every policy disagreement personal because they are so personally embarrassed from their own failures. And so this has nothing to do with a personality. This has to do with breach of an agreement. I laid that breach out weeks ago. I stood on the floor. You all covered it. And I said, these are the areas of breach. They have to be rectified. Instead of getting any sincere effort to resolve that, you know, we heard the Speaker's profanity and his bluster, and that's simply not strong leadership.
Do you believe that
I'll go to Rachel next.
Mr. Gaetz, are you concerned that some conservatives who agree that McCarthy is in breach of these promises he made in January are not backing your effort? People like Chip Roy, Byron Donalds, Thomas Massey, obviously somebody who tried to oust Boehner, says that this could backfire conservatives. Are you worried about that pressure and that fracture in conservatives actually undercutting you?
Chip Roy and Thomas Massey, we all want to get to the same place. We all want to have less spending. We want to return to the budget process that is in law. And I hold no ill will toward them if they make a different tactical choice than I've made. So if my dear friends who I agree with on almost everything, Mr. Roy and Mr. Perry and Mr. Massey, want to own Kevin McCarthy, then that can be their choice, and they can make whatever choice they'd like.
Does Trump support this effort? Does Trump support this effort?
You have threatened that if you fail, you will continue to call up...
That question's already been asked.
Mr. Gaetz, do you believe that that your fellow Republicans who vote in favor of Kevin McCarthy should receive primary challenges in the 2024 election?
Listen, some of them, but certainly not all of them. There'll be a number of great conservatives and friends of mine who do vote with Speaker McCarthy. I don't have confidence in him anymore, and I think a requisite number of Republicans have lost confidence, such that the only way he'll be able to stay in power is by working for the Democrats. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to go to some people that haven't had a chance to ask a question. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Congressman, so you are saying, that you don't trust Kevin McCarthy. A number of Democrats right now are saying the same thing, that they don't trust him.
The one thing we have in common is he's lied to all of us.
A handshake deal right now. If you were to move forward, if there were to be any kind of agreement, what would that look like, and what would you need to see from the Speaker at this moment?
Well, I think the die is cast based on the motion I just filed. I think the time for that discussion would have been over the last several weeks, but instead we saw the Speaker continuing the Speaker did not just fail to remediate the breach of the agreement he made with us in January, he accelerated the instances of breach. Like, after I laid out the breach, he went and violated the 72-hour rule. After I laid out the breach, he violated the $100 million no amendment suspension rule. So he seems to be reverting to the very unfortunate muscle memory of Washington, D.C. that has put our nation atop a $33 trillion debt, that has led to $2 trillion annual deficits in our near future, and the rapid global de-dollarization of the economy. I mean, you look at the BRICS system, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they're moving away from the dollar. And just in August, they added 6 new countries, including G20 economies in the Western Hemisphere and Gulf monarchies. Moreover, you saw U.S. News say that the number one economic trend of 2023 is de-dollarization globally. This worries me. You all get all worked up that there's going to be some uncomfortable, chaotic moment, that I'll feel pressure from conservatives or Democrats or whomever. I feel the judgment of history. I feel the weight of that. I worry that when the history books are written about this country going down, that my name is going to be on the board of directors here. And if this country's going down, and if we're losing the dollar, I am going down fighting. And I don't care if that means fighting Republicans, Democrats, the Uniparty, the leadership, the PACs, the lobbyists. I've had it. I've been here 7 years. We don't have a fucking budget. We haven't had one since the mid-90s. I am through with it. I apologize for using that word, but the only path forward here is to have single subject spending bills that can be reviewed, amended, considered, and I think that is the responsible way that our legislatures all over this country operate, for good reason.
We just had a really good conference in there. We talked about what we're going to take on the floor. We got our appropriation bills up. I'm going to bring up the motion to vacate today. We'll do it in the first series and move through this.
Speaker McCarthy, will you still be Speaker of the House by the end of tonight?
If I counted how many times someone wanted to knock me out, I would have been gone a long time ago. Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about why do it today? I mean, the idea that you
why not
rip the Band-Aid off here, or what?
Why not? Look, I think Matt has planned this all along. It didn't matter what we transpired. He would have done it if we were in shutdown or not. I firmly believe it's the right decision to keep government open, to make sure our military is still paid, our border agents are still paid. And if that makes a challenge based upon whether I should be Speaker, I'll take that fight.
So you're calling his bluff?
Yeah.
What was your conversation like with Mr. Jeffries? Why did you call him?
Well, I have to talk to Jeffries about a lot of things. We talk every week. We talk sometimes during the week. We've got some issues going on, the Bowman. I always try to let him know what's going to be coming to the floor and others. My only conversation with Jeffries, I got a lot of respect for him. You guys do whatever you need to do. I get politics. I understand where people are. I truly believe, though, the institution of the House. At the end of the day, if you throw a speaker out that has 99% of their conference, that kept government open and paid the troops, I think we're in a really bad place for how we're going to run Congress.
So are you expecting Democrats to back you up then?
No, I personally am not.
Do you need their help to remain in leadership?
No. If five Republicans go with Democrats, then I'm out. So it's whether.
Likely.
Probably so.
This is a bit of a complex piece of algebra here, because you don't know with attendance, you don't know with present votes. I mean, tell me why you're so confident based on what the mathematical equation is.
Because I live in America.
No, I know, but I mean, this is a serious.
It is a serious question.
Issue.
Have you ever? Okay, take the current situation out. Have you ever come to me on no matter what you thought I couldn't solve, that I wasn't confident?
I'm not questioning your confidence.
But you're asking why I'm confident? Because who I am. And I just don't give up. So there are obstacles in my life. I have fallen many times. There was a time I was going to be Speaker and I couldn't, and you guys all counted me out. I'm Speaker. I'm the 55th Speaker of the House. You're confident that government was going to shut down. You were confident the debt ceiling wouldn't get done. But each and every time, if it's an obstacle, I view it as a challenge, and we're going to solve the challenge. We're going to take it heads on.
Are you confident that you'll hold on?
I'm confident I'll hold on.
Do you think this is going to keep coming up repeatedly?
It could. It seems very personal with Matt. It doesn't look like he's looking out for the country or the institution. I mean, I gave this quote away. You ought to read, maybe I'll give it to you later in a process of what canon.
Are you ruling out any sort of power-sharing agreement with Democrats or any sort of deals with Democrats?
That doesn't work. Look, I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative one that gets things done. Look, I know we live in our government's designed to have compromise, but look, we're in the majority. You don't surrender. Do you work with the other side? Yeah, and that's what I've done. I mean, from the day I came in, I've always said, I'm going to treat Hakeem the way I wanted to be treated. And I think you've seen that. Everything doesn't have to be political. And I firmly believe when you look at history, and when I talk to the other speakers like a Boehner or Paul Ryan, the first thing when they would meet, Nancy Pelosi would come, and she would simply say to him, if anyone ever did that motion, we would stand with you. Not because of you and not because we agree politically, simply because of the institution needs to be able to stand on its own. First thing she did when she became Speaker was she removed that. And you know what? It gave me the power to make that motion on her. I had a lot of Republicans that wanted me to do it. I never did it. Did Nancy and I get along? No, we really don't get along. But I thought the institution was too important, and I thought that was too personal. But you know, at the end of the day, keeping government open and paying our troops was the right decision. I stand by that decision. At the end of the day, if I have to lose my job over it, so be it. But I'm going to fight for the American public, and I'll continue to fight. Thank you all very much.
Gentleman from Oklahoma's time is reserved. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, my friend from Oklahoma says that my colleagues and I who don't support Kevin McCarthy would plunge the House and the country into chaos. Chaos is Speaker McCarthy. Chaos is somebody who we cannot trust with their word. The one thing that the White House, House Democrats, and many of us on the conservative side of the Republican caucus would argue is that the thing we have in common, Kevin McCarthy said something to all of us at one point or another that he didn't really mean and never intended to live up to. I don't think voting against Kevin McCarthy is chaos. I think $33 trillion in debt is chaos. I think that facing a $2.2 trillion annual deficit is chaos. I think that not passing single subject spending bills is chaos. I think the fact that we have been governed in this country since the mid-90s by continuing resolution and omnibus is chaos. And the way to liberate ourselves from that is a series of reforms to this body that I would hope would outlast Speaker McCarthy's time here, would outlast my time here, and would outlast either of our majorities. Reforms that I have heard some of the most conservative members of this body fight for, and some of the reforms that we've been battling for that I've even heard those in the Democrat caucus say would be worthy and helpful to the House, like open amendments, like understanding what the budget is. We have been out of compliance with budget laws for most of my life, most of many of your lives. And by the way, if we did those things, if we had single subject bills, if we had an understanding on the top line, if we had open amendments, if we had trust and honesty and understanding, there would be times when my conservative colleagues and I would lose, might be a few times when we'd win. There'd be times that we would form partnerships that might otherwise not be really predictable in the American body politic, but the American people would see us legislating. These last few days, we've suspended the momentum that we had established the week earlier, where we were bringing bills to the floor, voting on them, staying late at night, working hard. That's what the American people expect. It's something Speaker McCarthy hasn't delivered, and that's why I've moved to vacate the chair. I reserve.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
The opening line of my colleague's speech was that Speaker McCarthy always overperforms expectations, but after tweeting, "Bring it," and after engaging in profane-laced tirades at House conference, he just lost a motion to table. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that overperforming expectations. And time and again, I've heard my colleagues say that, well, he deserves it because he went through a tough speaker contest. Let me let everyone know, he prevailed in that speaker contest because he made an agreement to fulfill certain commitments to make this an open and honest process, and he has failed to meet those commitments, and that's why we are here. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Yeah, the problem with my friend from Ohio's argument is that many of the bills he referenced as having passed are not law. We are on a fast track to an omnibus bill, and it is difficult to champion oversight when House Republicans haven't even sent a subpoena to Hunter Biden. So it's hard to make the argument that oversight is the reason to continue when it sort of looks like failure theater. I yield such time as he may consume to my colleague from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every step of the way, Speaker McCarthy has been doubted. After the first speaker vote, he was mocked, right? And after 15, they called him speaker. And even then, it was the media and the left that mocked him. With the narrowest Republican majority in a generation, what did we achieve? We brought the president to the table when he stubbornly said for 100 days they would not negotiate on the debt ceiling. I took him at his word. The speaker said, no, we'll get him to the table. And sure enough, we did. The result? The most conservative spending package we've seen in generations, the largest spending cuts year over year that any Congress has passed. Conservative outcomes. So I understand your position on the left. I understand that. But my friends on the right, why? And then this past weekend, so I understand the frustration on the left at what happened on the continuing resolution. But why would we have conservatives object to that? Why will we have House members object to that? We rolled the Senate. We never roll the Senate as a House. Moreover, we never roll the Senate to get less spending, and we got it this weekend. So I understand why the left is mad. What I don't understand is why some Republicans think that that's a bad thing. The frustration for me today, I understand where the liberals are. I know you support the constitutional order, except in a moment like this when you are questioned on that. I understand that. You can't be counted on in a moment like this with the state of the speakership. But for Republicans, why will we give up a conservative working majority for better outcomes and hand the keys over to the Democrats? Why would we do that? And furthermore, with this record of success that we've seen Kevin McCarthy and a Republican majority produce in a Washington run by Democrats, we're going to throw that away, resulting in more liberal outcomes, not more conservative ones. So I understand why the left is where you are today. You don't like an effective conservative majority, and I don't blame you. But on the right,
gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Florida.
It is lovely to hear from the principal architect of Mr. McCarthy's debt limit deal, but here's the reality. The only Republicans in America who believe that the debt limit deal was conservative are in this chamber right now. Because all over America, Republicans think that when you negotiated that debt limit deal, they took your lunch money. I reserve.
One from Florida.
I agree with everything that the majority leader said in those remarks, except one thing. It is astonishing to hear any colleague give Speaker McCarthy credit for moving on to the single subject appropriations bills. As you heard my colleague Mr. Biggs say, that was never the plan from Speaker McCarthy. The week before we moved on to those single subject appropriations bills, the plan was another CR. He pitched a CR. They tried to get us to vote for a CR, and only when a brave few said, we are done governing by continuing resolution. We are here to eulogize the era of continuing resolution. We will not do it. We will not pass it. These bills can go. The spending may rise and fall as the years pass, but the notion that we're going to lump in the Department of Education and the Department of Labor with our military and our troops and our Border Patrol is fundamentally unserious, and I would suggest chaotic. We cannot do that. It was only because we forced that to happen. And by the way, if we continue with Speaker McCarthy, the appropriations process will go right back to what he wanted it to go back to just a sideshow, just a puppet show, just something to keep the hamsters on the hamster wheel as they continue to back people up against a calendar, centralize power with the lobbyists and special interests that move all kind of money through the leadership, and then that's how they get their way, and that's why the American people have been getting screwed decade after decade, and I'm not going to tolerate it anymore without a fight. I reserve.
Gentleman, my very good friend from the great state of Louisiana, Mr. Graves.
Gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Graves, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Oklahoma for yielding. Mr. Speaker, we've been here for 8 months with one of the tightest majorities in modern history. Yet look at the accomplishments of this majority, this conservative majority, with the majority of Republicans voting for the strongest border security in my lifetime, fighting against this incomprehensible energy policy that's driving up energy costs 40%, utility and gasoline payments, pushing Americans into energy poverty. We passed legislation to unleash America's energy resources, pushing back this administration's brainless policies on energy. We've passed legislation to pull back, to stop spending $4.8 trillion that I want to make note. My friends that are carrying this motion to vacate opposed. We've passed legislation to streamline regulations, permitting, environmental laws for the first time in 40 years. Again, my friends here opposed. We strengthened work requirements for welfare to get people back into the workforce. Again, my friends over here opposed. I keep wondering, what is going on? Are we redefining what conservative is? What's going on in this country today? What's going on in this body? Where you have Freedom Works, Heritage, Chip Roy, and Jim Jordan say something's conservative, and these folks say it's not, and they're right. And all of a sudden, my phone keeps sending text messages. Text messages saying, hey, give me money. Oh, look at that. Oh, look, give me money. I filed the motion to vacate. Using official actions to raise money. It's disgusting. It's what's disgusting about Washington. Mr. Speaker, we've watched as these folks right here that have brought up this motion to vacate have refused to pay our military service members, refused to pay them. I want to quote my delegation member, my senator from Louisiana, John Kennedy. If we're not going to pay our service members, if they're not going to be there to protect us, next time someone invades America, call a crackhead and let me know how that works out for you.
Yield the gentleman another 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard people talk about bad faith here. I've heard them make reference to this January agreement. My friends from Arizona, Virginia, and Florida. Let me be crystal clear. Not a single one of them were in the room. You know what? The Speaker didn't meet the targets of that January agreement. He exceeded them. The greatest savings in American history. The greatest savings in American history. Mr. Speaker, this isn't about fundraising. This is about our country. It's about our children and our grandchildren. We need to stand behind the slimmest
30
majority.
seconds.
We need to stand behind the greatest speaker in modern history that has delivered the best conservative wins for this country. I yield back.
Back is time. The gentleman from Florida is recognized with 3 minutes remaining.
To be clear, I tried to get one of the three podiums on the Republican side, and y'all wouldn't let me have them, so you sent me over here. But you know what? I'll make this argument at any desk in this building, from the well, from the chair. I'll make it on every street corner in this country that Washington must change. We have to break the cycle. We have to break the fever. And I would hope, truly, that the reforms that we are fighting for are reforms that would last and be embraced and that would democratize power in this institution beyond the privileged few who back us up against shutdown politics and Christmases and deadlines in order to achieve their objectives. Mr. Speaker, high inflation is on the verge of bankrupting American families. Our economy is breaking in half. A typical American family can't afford to buy a house in 99% of U.S. counties. Inflation is stealing more than $700 a month from working Americans, nearly $9,000 a year. Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he has failed to take a stand where it matters. So if he won't, I will. I make no apologies for defending the right of every hardworking American to afford a decent life for themselves and their families. And we have a greater opportunity to do that and to build coalitions under new leadership. We have to rip off the Band-Aid. We have to get back on a better course. And Mr. Speaker, I don't know how this vote's going to go. Usually when a vote comes to this floor, it's pretty predetermined. And this one, I'm not so sure. But I am sure that we've made the right argument, that this place deserves single-subject spending bills, that we should have 72 hours to read a bill, that something that spends more than $100 million shouldn't be put on the suspension agenda such that we can't amend it, and there shouldn't be secret side deals made on a continuing resolution to lump Ukraine in with border security. That is not right for Ukraine or border security because it fails to give either of those issues the dignity that they would require. But we can return that dignity to this House. We can get back on a better path. We can have single subject appropriations bills. We can set a budget top line. We haven't had a budget in this place since I was in high school. So let's get a budget. Let's get our act together. Let's get on with it. Let's vacate the chair. And let's get a better speaker. I yield back. Been paralyzed for the last several decades as we've refused to pass a budget, as we've governed by continuing resolution and omnibus bill. So I think that this represents the ripping off of the Band-Aid, and that's what we need to do to get back on track.
Would you be with 200 Republicans? How do you pass anything?
What do you say to your colleagues who argue you don't have another name right now? You don't have someone else who could get 218 votes. What do you tell those colleagues?
Well, I would tell them that for certain Kevin McCarthy can't get 218 votes, so let's try the next person.
So how do you
Would you be okay with McHenry? He's the pro tem, obviously.
There would have to be a real meeting of the minds there.
Congressman Gaetz, how do you pass something if there's
I'm sorry,
200,
someone else, you've had a question. I was going to let you
Are you going to ask for a guarantee from whoever is floated as a candidate for the next speaker for them to actually move the appropriations process along in the speed that satisfies you?
Yes.
Congressman, at this
So,
point,
are you putting yourself forward for the speakership? Absolutely not. I have no desire to be speaker.
How do you pass something? With all due respect, how do you pass something if you don't have 200 Republicans behind you?
What's the path forward? I know we've already asked about names, but what about Emmer and others?
I think the world of Tom Emmer. He'd make a great speaker.
Congressman, have you spoken with Scalise? Have you spoken with Emmer?
I've spoken with him, but I'll probably keep our conversations between us.
Congressman, are you going to require?
What was going through your head when the vote gaveled down and it was official McCarthy was speaker?
We got to move to the next step. You know, we are not at the end of this process, okay? At most, we're approaching halftime. We've got to be able to assemble a governing coalition. We have to build from a place of trust. The reason Kevin McCarthy went down today is because nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy has made multiple contradictory promises, and when they all came due, he lost votes of people who maybe don't even ideologically agree with me on everything. Take, for example, my colleague from South Carolina, Ms. Mace. She has different views than I do on a variety of subjects, but what we had in common, Kevin McCarthy lied to all of us.
Hold on a second. You're saying that nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy, but you're talking about, including yourself, about 7 Republicans compared to about 200 and about, some odd Republicans who actually do trust him. So can you kind of explain that here?
Well, as it turns out, getting 200 Republicans to trust you isn't enough to stay speaker.
Compared to 7 Republicans.
At this point, would you require that
former President Trump about this since the ousting? Was he supportive of what you were doing?
I have spoken to President Trump over the last several days. The ousting only occurred several minutes ago, so we haven't spoken during that time.
At this point, are you going to require that any
social
speaker?
that he didn't think this was a good idea. He didn't want to see Republicans fighting with other Republicans. How do you respond to the former president?
I would say that my conversations with the former president leave me with great confidence that I'm doing the right thing.
Did the former president call you today?
Did the former president call you today? Americans who are concerned about the future of the conservative agenda in the House
I would say that the conservative agenda was being paralyzed by Speaker McCarthy. We hadn't even sent a subpoena to Hunter Biden. Our oversight was lackluster. Our spending priorities were misaligned. The top-line budget was going to lead to more inflation, more debt, more challenges. So the best way to advance the conservative agenda is to move forward with a new speaker.
Are you going to require that any future speaker elected allows a motion to vacate to stay at a one-person threshold?
Yes.
What other demands will you have?
Considering that
Steve Scalise votes in line with Speaker McCarthy most of the time. Why should he want the job after this just happened?
That's a question for him, I guess.
He's already said he's uninterested. He's already said he's
I haven't heard him say that.
No. He's already publicly.
Well, here's what I would say. Here's what I say. I think a lot of members are going to reflect on their thinking after this historic moment. I think anything that people have said before the McCarthy ouster is probably bearing less weight than the way people may be thinking about these questions after the McCarthy ouster.
You had some positive comments about Steve Scalise yesterday and today. Will you yourself nominate Steve Scalise for Speaker of the House?
Maybe. I want to see. I want to hear from him. I mean, I'm not here to make a judgment on where Mr. Scalise stands with his rehabilitation and recovery. I would give him the deference to be able to decide whether or not he'd like to put himself forward as a candidate. But he'd be the type of person that I could see myself supporting. There are many people, though. I could see myself supporting Tom Emmer. I could see myself supporting Mike Johnson of Louisiana. I could see myself supporting Jody Arrington of Texas. I could see myself supporting Kevin Hearn of Oklahoma. And there are even people outside of the United States Congress like Lee Zeldin, who are well thought of across every aspect of our conference. And I may give Lee Zeldin a call and see if he's interested in the gig.
Congressman Gaetz, you succeeded at pushing the House to move forward with the appropriations process as you wanted. You succeeded.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, because I just heard on the floor a bunch of these McCarthy allies say, well, gosh, it's Kevin McCarthy who led us to this moment with single subject appropriations bills. And in fact, the only work we've gotten done has been with a political gun to the Speaker's
So you've
head.
gotten that accomplished.
The former Speaker, I should
You've gotten the Speaker ousted. What's next?
Well, the next we got to elect a new Speaker. Sorry, guys.
Are you running for governor of Florida in 2026?
2 minutes.
Anyone and everyone who knows Kevin McCarthy, whether they are friend or foe, knows that Kevin McCarthy is a happy warrior. He is tireless. He has that uniquely American grit. Under Kevin's speakership that lasted 15 rounds of him never giving up, this Republican majority has exceeded all expectations. We reopened the People's House. We passed the strongest border security bill in our nation's history. We passed an energy plan to unleash American energy dominance. We passed defense bills to support our troops. Under Kevin's leadership, he's brought hundreds and hundreds of bipartisan members of Congress to Israel, our greatest ally. He elected the most diverse class of Republicans ever, with the largest number of Republican women ever in American history. This boy from Bakersfield, he cares deeply about his constituents, his country, and the American people. And that includes each and every one of his colleagues. He's been to our districts,
Gentlelady will
toasted at our
suspend.
weddings, celebrated the birth of our children, and has cheered us when we haven't believed in ourselves, which is why the Republicans strongly support Speaker McCarthy and are proud he is our Speaker. And I yield back.
Gentlelady, it was not the intent to cut the gentlelady off, except that we have too much chatter going on in the House chamber. Every member deserves to be heard. So if you have private conversations you need to have, please take them from the floor. Gentlelady may continue.
As I have said, this Speaker has been to our districts. He has toasted at our weddings. He has celebrated the birth of our children, mourned the loss of our loved ones. Now more than ever, the Republicans must unify. The stakes are too high. We need to save our country, which is why this conference is proud to strongly support Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida.
Now, I would just say, if this House of Representatives has exceeded all expectations, then we definitely need higher expectations. And while it's heartwarming and kind that the Speaker calls people on their birthday and visits their district and congratulates them on their children, please know this isn't a critique of the individual, it's a critique of the job. The job hasn't been done. We've had multiple contradictory promises, and it's just quite something. For those of you keeping track at home, the last 3 speakers you've heard opposing my resolution all voted for the debt deal. So, if you believe that the debt limit deal that Speaker McCarthy brought into law was a good thing, maybe you agree with their perspective. I think the debt limit deal was a terrible deal, and that's one of the reasons. It really was the original sin of the McCarthy speakership, and it's one of the reasons I seek to vacate the chair now. I reserve.
Gentlemen, time is reserved.
Go right ahead.
I hear you talking about the challenge to Republicans. I wonder what you think this means, what this says about the Republican Party.
I don't think it says about the Republican Party. I think it says something about some people who are not a conservative. I mean, if you were a conservative and you only had one entity making the battle and you vote against securing the border, you vote against cutting this wasteful spending, and then you partner with all the Democrats. Now, you'll phrase it all the other different ways. That's not a conservative. Look, you all know Matt Gaetz. You know it was personal. It had nothing to do about spending. It had nothing to do about everything he accused somebody of he was doing. It all was about getting attention from you. I mean, we're getting email fundraisers from him as he's doing it. Join in quickly. That's not governing. That's not becoming of a member of Congress. And regardless of what you think, I've seen the text. It was all about his ethics. But that's all right.
Mr. President, can I just clarify really quickly from the first question? Are you considering resigning?
No, I said, he asked about that. I haven't thought about that. I said, yeah.
And then just on where you're placing the blame, you said the institution is...
No. No. I'm not going to blame anybody. There's not blame anywhere. Look, I give it as good as I get it, right? So you know the challenge. I knew going in. You would take a poll all the time. Is he going to get thrown out this week? But you know what? If I lose my job over doing what I truly believe what's right, I'm very at peace with it. You asked earlier, like, when did I decide? I knew they would make the motion on me. It didn't make one bit of difference. I felt very comfortable in that decision. And I think the American public believed that decision was right. That's the conference's decision. I intend to make sure that we gain and keep the majority in the next cycle as well. With that, I look forward to your positive questions. Yes. Oh, I'll look at that.
You still obviously command a lot of loyalty within the conference. We've heard you say approximately 10,000 times that you never give up. So I'm wondering, why not? Why did you make the decision not to put your name forward again and try to grind it out like you did when you won the job in the first place?
You know, you need 218 for the rule, 218 to move forward. And I'll never give up on the American people. That doesn't mean I have to be Speaker to do what I have to do for the American people. There's a lot of things I could do for the American people. But you know what's interesting? Everybody's sitting there. In today's world, if you're sitting in Congress and you took a gamble to make sure government was still open, and 8 people can throw you out as Speaker, and the Democrats who said they wanted to keep government open, I think you've got a real divide. I think you've got a real institutional problem. Interesting, it was in this room after we had won the majority, I had become Speaker last, and Nancy Pelosi came to me. She was Speaker at the time on the way out. And I told her I was having issues with getting enough votes. And she said, what's the problem? I said, they want this one person can rule you out. She was the only Speaker to have changed that rule. I had the power to call the vote on her, but I never would. I lost some votes because of it. And she said, just give it to him. I'll always back you up. I made the same offer to Boehner and same thing to Paul, because I believe in the institution. I think today was a political decision by the Democrats. And I think the things they have done in the past hurt the institution. When they just started removing people from committee. And they just started doing the other things. And my fear is the institution fell today. Because you can't do the job if 8 people, you have 94% or 96% of your entire conference, but 8 people can partner with the whole other side. How do you govern? And for them to make a motion on me because I made a decision for the country that they agreed with, but they choose to do the other, that becomes a problem. Yes, sir.
So, one, are you planning on endorsing a successor to you? And then
I might. I might. Yeah. I don't know who's running that.
Okay.
I'll talk to people.
And when you look back, is there anything you could have done differently to what those 8 members?
Yeah, a lot of them I helped get elected, so I probably should have picked somebody else.
What if the 200 don't give up on you? I see Jim Banks
You know, we
Nominated again. If you keep getting nominated, will you
you know, I love these 200. They've gone through so much. They're down in the conference. They want me to. They'll say they're going to keep voting for me. I think you should put the country first. You know, this job was never about me. I hope you felt that I always felt, what can we do best to move forward? I mean, I treated Hakeem the way I wanted to be treated. I'd tell him things we were doing throughout, so he never was questioned. I wanted to bring the body back differently. We created a select committee on China. I changed the Intel committee. They just came back from MIT where they all had bipartisan briefing on AI and quantum. Started doing briefings with AI the whole conference of Republicans and Democrats alike. We're far from solving that problem, but I'm proud of what we were able to do there. So we'll continue. Yes, sir.
When did you make this decision? Did you know the motion eventually succeeded that you would not run again, or was this right afterwards?
You know, not all those 8, but these are the same people that never voted for me. They thought it was big. They went to present after we went through 15 rounds. Why do I do something for myself that can hurt the country? Why create? I'm not quite sure those individuals are looking to be productive. It concerns me as a Republican based upon watching what they do. I want to be a Republican and a conservative that governs. And we're going to have to find our way to do that. The challenge is we had so many opportunities. These are the same people that sat on the floor and criticized me that we didn't get all 12 spending bills done, but we first had to do a debt ceiling that they didn't support. They held up every appropriation bill in the summer because they wouldn't let it come through. After the debt ceiling, they stopped us from doing anything on the floor. When we had a continuing resolution that would do something on the border, I listened to one talk about how it made him think about the border and when he voted against it. And then they wanted to challenge me because I worked with the other side so America could go forward and government could stay open. You know, if you have to lose for something, I will always lose for the country. It is a much better battle to have. Yes, sir. Change the rules. Do you think I let it? I mean, for the whole point, I mean, if you talk about like a Gaetz, Gaetz came to the whole conference and said, we will never use this. We'll never use this, you know. I mean, this is a man that sat there on the 14th vote and said, okay, I'm going to vote for you next time, and falls back and not. So, I mean, it's just the trustworthiness of a lot of individuals. It makes it difficult. But I do not think, regardless of who the speaker is, that you should have that rule. You know, everybody had it but Pelosi, but it was never used until it started getting used against Boehner. And if the entire other, if you can always count on the other party to vote in a block against it, then you're allowing 4 to 5 people to control whatever. So it doesn't matter even if you have 96%. So that is not a government that works. That is chaotic.
Last question.
Yeah.
Is the Republican Party
Okay, wait, go right ahead.
I hear you talking about the challenge to Republicans. I wonder what you think this means, what this says about the Republican Party.
I don't think it says about the Republican Party. I think it says something about some people who are not a conservative. I mean, if you were a conservative and you only had one entity making the battle and you vote against securing the border, you vote against cutting this wasteful spending, and then you partner with all the Democrats. Now, you'll phrase it all the other different ways. That's not a conservative. Look, you all know Matt Gaetz. You know it was personal. It had nothing to do about spending. It had nothing to do about everything he accused somebody of he was doing. It all was about getting attention from you. I mean, we're getting email fundraisers from him as he's doing it. Join in quickly. That's not governing. That's not becoming of a member of Congress. And regardless of what you think, I've seen the text. It was all about his ethics. But that's all right.
Mr. Murphy, can I just clarify really quickly from the first question? Are you considering resigning?
No, I said, he asked about that. I haven't thought about that. I said, yeah.
And then just on where you're placing the blame, you said the institution is...
Look. No. I'm not going to blame anybody. There's not blame anywhere. Look, I give it as good as I get it, right? So you know the challenge. I knew going in. You would take a poll all the time. Is he going to get thrown out this week? But you know what? If I lose my job over doing what I truly believe what's right, I'm very at peace with it. You asked earlier, like, when did I decide? I knew they would make the motion on me. It didn't make one bit of difference. I felt very comfortable in that decision. And I think the American public believed that decision was right. That's the conference's decision.
Mr. Cardi, now you mentioned that you're looking to maybe help still in another way, but would you consider having another position somewhere in Congress, whether it's leadership or the chairmanship? Can you talk about that?
No. There's a lot of great people in conference. There's always other people to do jobs. It is amazing the talent that we had. And the one thing I've always hoped as Speaker, that we lifted more of that talent up. I look at people doing a lot of different jobs and the different opportunities we did, and they're doing an exceptional job. We have so much talent. It is remarkable. Yes.
Was this kind of in your mind a little bit preordained from the beginning? Obviously, it was a much more narrow majority than what you anticipated, what Republicans considered. 15 rounds, the longest speaker's race since 1859.
I made history, didn't I?
It was that, well, we did do that, yeah. But was that kind of always thought that it was inevitably going to go this because of the narrow majority and because the writing might have been on the wall?
Well, would any of you think, if it took that long and you had one person, you knew it was always a possibility, so that was fine. Didn't bother me, didn't change any of my decision I made. But it was interesting. I read a tweet the other day of Matt Rosendale. He goes to Mass every day. But you know what he said his prayer was all last year? That Republicans didn't have a big victory, that they had a narrow victory. When you have members like that are part of your team, you got a tough team. You know, look, when I was in business, I got to hire and fire who worked with me. Somebody else hires them, somebody else fires them. My job was to inspire them. I think we did some good work, and I think we'll continue to do great work. Yes, sir.
Can you reflect back on 2010 when you guys were the young guns, right? You, Paul Ryan,
Eric Cantor, yeah.
Now, all three of you guys have been essentially...
Well, we're not that young anymore.
Well, all three of you have been pushed out by so-called more conservative members.
No, let's be fair, and it's wrong that you ever say. They are not conservatives. They voted against, one, the greatest cut in history that Congress has ever voted for, $2 trillion. They voted against work requirements. They voted against NEPA reform. They voted against border security. They voted against... They don't get to say they're conservative because they're angry and they're chaotic. That's not the party I belong to. The party of Reagan was if you believed in your principles that you could govern in a conservative way. They are not conservatives, and they do not have the right to have the title. Yes.
Are you worried that Donald Trump will turn your party in this direction that makes it difficult to govern, makes it difficult to get conservative voices?
Why do you say that? Because your question doesn't hold true to history. When Donald Trump was president, we did tax reform. You can look at all of our different successes. So, I mean, you may dislike the policy, but we've been very successful. You watched the Abraham Accords. I mean, you can go victory after victory. The price of gas, we were energy independent at the time. We had more businesses growing at the time. We didn't have to evacuate our embassies. You know, it's easy on its merit to see the difference of what Biden has destroyed America to what the policies we were able to create. Yes, sir.
Can I ask you, what about your conversation with King Jeffries? What did he ask from you? What were you asking from him?
No, we didn't ask for anything.
You didn't ask for anything at all? You didn't ask any impeachment inquiry or anything like that?
No. And, you know, I have a lot of respect for Hakeem. He wants to win the majority. I heard what they said in conference, you know. Why would they vote for me if I've won every time as leader? I raised 70% of all the money. It's an opportunity for them. The real question to the 8, why would you enable and allow the Democrats to do it? That's the question, yes.
Do you regret making concessions to those holdouts?
What concessions did I make?
You could have leaned towards Democrats to give them possibly
To what?
to secure your speakership in your first.
Look, I'm not going to, no. I'm a Republican. I win by Republicans and I lose by Republicans. It's not that way. And so, did I work with, I believe you should work across the aisle. I worked across the aisle at times. Do I want to make the bill the most conservative possible? Yes, that's the goal. It's difficult when you can't get 218 for the conservative bill. And then they want to challenge you when you went and solved and kept the government open. Yes, sir.
The last few months, you've been a firewall against the debt ceiling crisis, government shutting down.
We did pretty well, didn't we?
How big of a risk do you think a shutdown is in November without you as Speaker?
Oh, other people can do the job. You know, it's interesting. I've never received so many texts from so many senators about how big a play we just did the other day, or how many congratulations about the debt ceiling and the other. I mean, if I would go back to the days before the debt ceiling, none of you even thought I'd get a meeting with the president. All of you'd ask me, is it going to fall off the cliff? End of the day, we worked an agreement out. Some of those people got mad about it, but 2/3, the highest number of Republicans ever voted for a debt ceiling when you had it. And you only negotiated based upon the deal we went. That was the moment they wanted to go after, and that's what they continued to follow through.
You mentioned that
Yeah.
you don't mind negotiating, and you think that's part of the job. So
You should. Look, government's designed that you have to have compromise. No, you can't get everything that you want. You know, you got a House, you got a Senate, but you had more to the question.
Well, my point was, my question was just going to be that some of the criticism leveled at you today by both Democrats and by Republicans is that perhaps you've been too transactional.
In which way?
Part about keeping your word.
In which word did I not keep? Name one thing I did not keep.
Gaetz says that there's several things you didn't keep from January.
Oh, no, tell me. What did Gaetz say? What did I not keep in Gaetz' mind? Because Gaetz had never been a part of a discussion. Just because Gaetz said something, don't believe it's true. I haven't heard him say one true thing yet.
Democrats say you reneged
On what? On what?
on the debt ceiling.
That is not true. So no. If you're going to ask the question, you're going to say it. Tell me how I did something different on the debt ceiling bill. Any of you. Tell me what I did different on the debt ceiling, that I didn't keep my word.
You said it was a floor, you said it was a ceiling.
Is it not a ceiling? Okay, this is the Okay, no. When you agree to spending levels, that's the maximum amount you can spend. This is what is wrong with Washington. Because it's the height that you can spend, you can also spend less. We're a different body. So does any of you believe then the Senate broke their word on the debt ceiling? Because they spent more than the limit. But somehow I'm wrong because I want to save the taxpayers more money? We're our own body. I have 2 children. If I give them each $100 for dinner and one spends $100 and one spends $80, am I going to yell at the one who spent $80 and said, oh my God, you got to spend it all? It's not our money. And why am I getting criticized because I'm fighting for the American people that we can eliminate waste? And you know what? We're our own body. So if we can pass the bills, and the Senate can pass the bills, but they pass them higher, but they haven't passed anything, somehow I'm wrong? I kept my word. I did not spend over the limit. They broke their word.
You don't feel you're too transactional, though.
Okay, you used the word, how was I transactional? If you ask a question, I want you to show an example. Give me an example.
The definition is basically this for that.
So what did I do this for that?
Well, on the Ukraine, on the CR, you've been talking about leaving in, leaving it out, and then finally put it out.
No, you're making no sense. What transactional did it? No, I did no transactional. I tried to pass a conservative stopgap measure that secured the border and actually cut spending. When that didn't go, the only bill that was going was sitting over in the Senate, that had a stopgap measure, disaster, and Ukraine. I made a decision as Speaker to keep the government open, and I put something on the floor. And let me get this straight to all of you, because someone said I did wrong. 72-hour rule, I'm the only one who's lived by it. We're the ones who created it. We never broke the 72-hour rule. The bill I put on the floor was a suspension, which takes a 2/3 vote. And you know what? You can put a suspension on a rule, and you can waive it based upon the leadership. That's exactly what I followed. So my question to you is, when somebody says something, don't take it that it's gospel. Why don't you ask them to point? When Gaetz said I didn't follow, said, show me one place. You saw Massey, Thomas Massey, who is the hardest line person, say we followed all the rules all the time. That he was in the room when the agreement was made, and then we surpassed what we said we would do. So if you ask me a question, I'm going to answer back, because when it's not true, it's not fair.
How important is it that the Speaker of the House be a member of the institution? Some members are floating former President Trump.
They always float some of them. Yes, you had. Okay. First of all, you got to be in the institution to understand how it works. And look, it's legal to have somebody else. I just do not think that would ever be good. Do I regret? You start with this question. No, I don't think you've ever been positive on yet, but come on. I have high hope. This is going to be exciting. That's a good thing. Okay, let's get through this. I personally like Tim Burchett, and I called Tim Burchett because I read his quote. And Tim Burchett's a friend of mine, which I'm kind of shocked by this. And Tim Burchett, in his quote, said he's leaning towards no, he's on CNN, but I'm going to pray about it. So I pick up the phone and call him, because I didn't think he was already there. I said, Tim, I read your quote. You said you're going to pray about it. I wanted to talk to you about it. And somehow he construes that I'm a Christian. I'm not going to offend somebody. I simply read his quote back. I thought there was still an opening, and I wanted to talk to him about it. He never mentioned anything when we were communicating like that. And he said, Nancy Mace is a whole nother story. Okay? Let's just be honest here. This is the one that I just got a text from her primary opponent saying, why'd you spend $3 million? But I called Nancy Mace's chief of staff yesterday. And because I called the chief of staff? Well, she was on The View saying I didn't keep my word, so I didn't know what to... Listen, I can't say this in the press, but okay. But so, no, you'll keep it among yourselves, right? Wait till my book. No. So I call her chief of staff because, I don't know, maybe I don't connect her with something else, but I just said to him, I said, can you please tell me, I don't understand, where have I not kept my word? You know what her chief of staff said? You have kept your word, 100%. Members come to me, and one thing, I don't like the idea that a member comes and tries to leverage me. I don't go for that. You know, I'll vote for the bill you do. That's not well. But if you have a problem with the bill, I want to help you. But I can't sit there and write your entire bill and work it all the way through committee. We just got our one bill out. And it came back, the other bill doing on guns, it just wasn't working. Do you want to do something else? We did something else. I just don't appreciate. Look, I bite my lip. I let people say things that are not true, but it's not right. It is not right. Her chief of staff told all of us we have kept every single one of our words. And he said he's told her that too. Now, if somehow he gets fired, I'll still get him a job.
Last question.
Yeah. Well, I'm being too honest now?
Your argument about the health of the institution might have resonated with more Democrats, if not for your response to January 6th. Do you regret it?
Oh, my God. No, but do I regret the Democrats playing games with January 6th? Yes. They played so many politics. What they did to this institution and what they did to this building was so wrong. The idea that they put magnetometers there, the idea that they would go to any Republican member that they had been co-sponsors of bills and they no longer could be a co-sponsor, that they would fine members $5,000 if the magnetometers went on, But when Nancy went around it, or Clyburn was supposed to get a fine, it all got waived. The idea that bills didn't have to go through committee. The idea is they created a select committee on January 6th, and they wouldn't let the minority appoint who to do it. Look, I'm trying to change all that and bring the body back to they can work together. But I think they did a lot of damage to us. Yes, sir.
The House is trying to pass the appropriations bills one by one. What are your expectations for that process now that you're not?
Well, that's always been my goal. I just talked to Mitch yesterday, and I had to call in to Schumer, and I talked to Hakeem last night. What I was going to do is, because we had taken 5 up, we passed 4 of them. I was going to start individually pre-conferencing so we can get this work done. I'm concerned with the timeline now. Look, I truly believe at the end of the day we can get this all worked out. I do believe at the end of the day we could find common ground and do something about the border. I don't know if this has caused problems. Look, I was doing Squawk today, and they had the other TV on, MSNBC. The first time I saw MSNBC running a whole story about the border with people just walking across. Pritzker sent a letter yesterday about the immigration. Massachusetts governor, state of emergency. Connecticut. Everybody is becoming the number one. They cannot ignore it. And I had told my members all before, I heard Gaetz say something on the floor that, oh my God, Kevin asked for a stopgap measure when we came back. The whole plan was because those 8 and a few more had held up passing any of these approach bills all summer, I was going to do just what we did Saturday, a stopgap measure with disaster. I'd gone out to Hawaii. We looked what happened in Florida. Those people shouldn't be held back. And we could finish doing it all individually, but somehow they think that's a dirty word. Yes.
Have you spoken with your family since this all went down this afternoon?
Oh, yeah, we checked. Oh, my poor mom. Have you guys met my mom yet? My mom's fabulous. My mom's this Italian lady. And she calls me the other day. She said, she gets worried. She reads what you guys write. And she says, I'm so nervous. I said, why, Mom? It's all right. She said, last night, she went in the house and she left her car running in the garage all night long, right? And my mom only fills her car up once a week at Costco on Wednesdays, then calls me because the price, she still lives in California, the price of gas is so high. She asked me what I'm going to do about it. But look, I think this job is always harder on your loved ones than you yourself. So they'll be okay.
Did you make a side deal with the White House on Ukraine?
No. Look, unequivocally no. Well, if you want to categorize this, let me see, because people think some big side deal. I did tell when we were doing the stopgap measure, there was a concern in there, does it have transferability on money? I believed and my staff believed it did, but what I did say to the White House, if it does not, if you think some way it doesn't do it the way you would, I will fix that. I did say that, and I did say I do it. Look, I support arming Ukraine. That doesn't mean sending them cash, but arming Ukraine. But I have been on the White House even before they sent this supplemental. I said, you guys are doing it all wrong by just sending us a supplemental. And I think the president is failing here because he's not telling the American public what is the mission. We have a lot of members who are Navy SEALs who've been in theater and F-18 pilots, and they're frustrated. They want to support, but they don't want to support an ever-ending war. They want to see what's going on here. And I've really been on the White House. You've got to come down and talk to them about it, but you should listen to them and the prospects. I'm really concerned, though, long-term. What's happening around looks a lot like the 1930s. A lot of actions that Putin takes is very similar to Hitler. If you are history buffs, you'll know Hitler served in the World War I army, right? He hated that his country collapsed, and they signed the Treaty of Versailles. And what did he do? He ran and created a new party and ran in democracy again and again and again until he won. And when he won, what did he do? He took the freedoms away. And then he rebuilt his military, and even though it went against the Treaty of Versailles, the world powers said nothing. And then what did he do? He took part of Czechoslovakia. He took Austria. And then he told the entire world he's going to take the rest of it on a given day. So now the world power could not sit back, so in come Neville Chamberlain. But what had happened? Well, Hitler loved it because he was equal now to the world power, but he saw weakness. Neville Chamberlain made him sign a piece of paper and told us peace for our time. And then he invaded Poland the next year, and World War II began. If you study Putin, Putin didn't serve in the Soviet Union army, but he served in the KGB. He hated that his country collapsed to the West. He hated it so much, when Gorbachev died, he still didn't attend the funeral. What did he do? He rebuilt his military. But he learned something. A military makes you strong, but dependency makes you weak. He rebuilt it by selling his natural gas to Europe. But when his pipeline that went through Ukraine, when they changed power, he didn't want to pay. So he proposed a new pipeline, Nord Stream 2. Everybody loved it. America at least sanctioned it. Merkel said, great. But what did he do when he rebuilt his military? Invaded Georgia, took part of the Donbass, took Crimea. And the world powers really didn't say much. But then when he parked 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine, and after he watched Afghanistan collapse, that's going to give us challenges for the next 2 decades. He got his meeting with the world power. So in comes Biden. And what does Biden do? He lifts the sanctions off Nord Stream 2, but asks nothing for it. Putin misreads that and invades Ukraine, thinking it would collapse in 2 weeks based upon Afghanistan. But now we have something even worse that's happened in the 1930s. Before Hitler moved, he created an axis of power, right? With Italy and Japan, all countries who wanted to expand their sphere of influence. Before Putin invaded Afghanistan, what did he do? Create an axis of power with China, North Korea, and Iran, all countries who want to expand their sphere of influence. So what we do here is very important. We can't sit there and just collapse it, because it'll look from Afghanistan. We can't just throw money at it. If we provide the weapons to be successful, but why it's so much personal to me, in 2014 or 2015, when Putin invaded the first time, I went to Ukraine. And then I came back. And I took a bipartisan group, and we went to the White House. And we sat in the Situation Room with then the vice president who was in charge of Ukraine, Joe Biden. And we advocated, let's sell them javelins so they can stop tanks. So they wouldn't invade. He said no. And he said Europeans wouldn't want it. I said, well, why don't we sell them to them now and keep them in Poland then? Didn't think that was right. And I fear of making the same mistake twice and sending the wrong messages. But the thing I would tell everybody is, more Americans are dying on the southern border than are dying in Ukraine. Each and every day, a plane of Americans crash from fentanyl. And I don't understand how the White House continues to ignore it. My whole plan, and I've been up front from the very beginning, what I would say, if you want anything on Ukraine, we got to do something with the border.
Mr. McCarthy, you mentioned earlier you regret helping get some of these.
I was joking. They're all right.
Considering supporting primary challenges to any of these 8 Republicans?
Well, you know, one of the things when I was running for Speaker, that said I couldn't get involved in primaries. But I told the conference I'm a free agent now, aren't I? I think I'm pretty good at electing people.
Mr. McCarthy, when was the last time you spoke to President Biden, and do you expect to now?
You know, I was thinking about that. It's been a long, long time. I couldn't remember when I spoke to him last. You know, I've worked with a couple different presidents. I would have thought, we had built some respect for one another going through the debt ceiling. I know he got frustrated with me, but, and I have a great deal of respect for the people in his office I worked for. Ricchetti and all of them, I think look, we have different philosophy, Schwanza and the others. They're smart, I respect them, they were honest, and I thought we made a good agreement. As a president, I would engage more. I think being hands-on, look, you're the leader of the free world. all the other presidents, I think bringing people together is a better way, talking through stuff. When you're in those rooms, you can talk about all sorts of things.
Do you think opening an impeachment inquiry into him and the behavior of his son might have contributed to that?
To what part?
The part about you guys not communicating very much?
No, let's talk about that. You guys play what? And remember what impeachment inquiry is. It is simply the ability to give the House, Republicans and Democrats, the power when you request for information. So if you were lawmakers, and I hold you in high esteem because you are investigative reporters in America, you're supposed to cover this stuff. When I came into power, I didn't know any of this. I did not know when he was vice president that his family created 20 shell companies. I had no idea about that. Not saying that's wrong. I did not know they got 16 of the 17 payments from Romania while he was vice president, and he was supposed to be in charge of Romania. I didn't know that. I had no idea when a whistleblower came to us and said that the FBI has an informant they still pay who claims that the president was bribed by $5 million. And what's interesting, we had to fight to get that document. And when we got that document, it said it would be hard to find because he has a lot of shell companies. Then I had no idea that IRS agents would come to us. How would I know? They'd come to us and say, look, we've worked for 16 years. We don't have any political basis on the other side, but we're concerned with what's happened here. That DOJ allowed the statute of limitations to run out. That they weren't allowed to interview Hunter because when they went and told the FBI, they told them. And then they even told the inaugural committee, I didn't know how that play in, that the DOJ would call Hunter Biden's attorneys and tell them that they didn't even know about a storage unit with all the papers before they could go there. The president told us he never had a meeting. He never talked to his son. Look, when he said he never talked to his son, I didn't believe that. And I don't think it's wrong if you talk to your son. I want you to talk to your kids about anything, right? Doesn't mean you're influencing something. But he literally, I had no idea that the partner to Hunter Biden that also served on the Ukrainian Energy Board said they would literally call into meetings. And then he said that they were getting a lot of pressure, Burisma, to do something about the Ukraine prosecutor. And I did know the president tell the entire country that he withheld $1 billion of American taxpayer money to get rid of the prosecutor. And then we found out that the president not only called into meetings, that he went to Cafe Milano. He went to Cafe Milano more times and met with the foreign business partners of Hunter Biden than he has gone to the border in 50 years. But with each meeting that you went to Cafe Milano, and I've never had this happen. I've been to Cafe Milano, but I've never gotten a new Porsche the next day, and I never got $3 million wired to me from a Russian oligarch. So if you knew all of that, would you at least say, I think there's more things. We've never asked for the tax or the bank statements of the president, of Hunter, or anybody else. And these 20 shell companies had credit cards that were being paid. Now, this laptop that was supposed to be Russian that we now found out was Hunter, in there, he did say his father would take the money from him. He did make, and we did find out that the president, I didn't know this when I became Speaker, used another name while he was vice president for emails. And in one of the emails, it said that it only went to him and his son, Hunter, and it was about a phone call he was going to have with the president of Ukraine. Now, if you knew all of that, would you say, oh, I don't have any more questions? Or would you at least, as a lawmaker, and you have a role here, wouldn't you at least say, okay, well, we're going to have to go get some more documents. And if you're going to get more documents, I just want to make sure if they're going to fight it and string everything out, that we can get it. That's all impeachment inquiry. Now, if that made the president upset, maybe he shouldn't have lied to us from the beginning. Yes?
Former President Trump was very active in supporting you when you won the Apple calling members. Mr. Gaetz, I know you said Mr. Gaetz is not telling the truth on several things. You claim today that the president was supportive of what he was doing to remove you. What was your experience talking to him?
I doubt if that's true. Yes, ma'am.
You spoke about your fundraising prowess and the impact you had in flipping the majority this year, last year. Are you nervous that because of events today and general infighting in the conference, that the conference is at risk of losing
Look, I didn't say that. I was just told that by Democrats in their conference. That's what helped them make their decision. That a lot of their frontline, I think their quote was, "Why would we help the person that becomes our executioner?" So, I mean.
Do you think that today's events will hurt the conference's chances of expanding the majority in 2024?
No, I'm sure Matt Gaetz will give the NRCSC a lot of money. He raised a lot online.
You mentioned that Gaetz' kind of grudge against you is personal. Why do you think he has this grudge? Why does he not like you?
I'm not quite sure. I don't need to find out either. Look, judge me by my enemies.
Have you spoken to the former president at any point today?
No.
So much of the theory of strategy for what the term has passed bills this year has been find consensus with the most conservative option, try and pass that, and then see if you can negotiate. Do you think that was the right tactic? Should Congress do that going forward, or would it be
Well, let me ask you this.
negotiate with Democrats earlier?
Let me ask you this. Would we ever gotten the debt ceiling? Schumer said never talk to us. Schumer went on a Sunday show, watch, Kevin's going to break. The president said he would never talk to me, that we just had to raise it. Had we not passed the bill, we never got it. So yes, I think it worked well. All right, yes.
What kind of role do you see yourself and want to see yourself playing in the party moving forward? Is that campaigning, or is there any other type of role you want?
Well, no, I'll continue to help all the way possible. Look, I've been very fortunate. When I came to Congress in my second term, I got to be Chief Deputy Whip. I got to be Majority Whip. I got to be Majority Leader. I've been Minority Leader, and I've been Speaker. I've been blessed. And there's something about 10,000 hours. I believe in it, a lot of different experience. And I believe in bringing new blood up and helping them, and I want to help them all the way. Look, I enjoy you. I don't know if you'll cover me as much, but I'm sure I won't miss you, but see you soon.
Things were getting really heated on the House floor yesterday, and I think something that perfectly encapsulates that temperature is after the ouster vote, Representative Patrick McHenry had the gavel and he slammed it to the point it looked like his wrist could have been broken. He couldn't not have slammed that gavel harder, and that really, spoke to the moment. That moment did go viral. So what are the implications here of the GOP?
I mean, the GOP is really in turmoil. I heard one lawmaker refer to them. I can't remember who it was. It is at this point, but he called them 8 selfish assholes who voted, to remove McCarthy. So it's lots of fiery quotes. People are very angry. The majority of the conference has expressed a lot of anger at the 8 defectors. There's threats to boot them from their various caucuses. Within the Republican conference, there's a number of ideological groups who make up the party, and the members who voted against McCarthy are facing threats to remove them. Newt Gingrich, as I mentioned, was pushed out of his position as Speaker in the 90s, has called for them to be primaried. So. Yes, a lot of turmoil within the Republican Party, and obviously there's a leadership shakeup underway and a forthcoming Speaker election, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So.
We will talk about that in a second, but I do obviously want to talk about the implications for 2024 here. We're a little over a year out from a presidential election. And what's the root of the divide here? Is it policy, or is it leadership, and is it personal? Because the fight between Gaetz and McCarthy seemed personal.
It did seem personal, and, there hasn't really been definitive reporting, I would say, proving that it was. Gaetz has denied that it was personal. Now, Gaetz has also reportedly upset at McCarthy for allowing a House ethics investigation into the allegations, the sex trafficking allegations against him, which, there was a criminal probe. Those charges were dropped. So that is one issue between the two. I think it's interesting that the former president did not really take sides on this over the weekend. He said that, he likes both Gaetz and McCarthy. Gaetz claimed that he felt Trump would be happy with the decision. Trump denied that today. So yes, I mean, it is a possibility that these 8 members could be primaried, and I'm sure that will come up in a campaign if they are. But I think overall, but they understand their bases and their districts, and at the end of the day, that's the reason that any lawmaker casts a vote. And you have to understand that this is why they did that. They believe that their base would feel like this is the right decision, and that McCarthy did not push the policies that their voters want to see in place. So yes, I think that overall, though, it'll be interesting to see when polling comes out how the American public feels about this, and how has it changed their views of the Republican Party, and do people ultimately blame Trump for this turmoil and sowing this division, and could it hurt him in the election next year?
What advice do you have for the next speaker? What would you like to see the next speaker?
Change the rules.
Do you regret allowing that rule to be in place?
Do you think I let it? I mean, for the whole point, I mean, if you talk about like a Gaetz, Gaetz came to the whole conference and said, we will never use this. We'll never use this, I mean, this is a man that sat there on the 14th vote and said, okay, I'm going to vote for you next time, and falls back and not. So, I mean, it's just the trustworthiness of a lot of individuals. It makes it difficult. But I do not think, regardless of who the speaker is, that you should have that rule. Everybody had it but Pelosi, but it was never used until it started getting used against Boehner. And if the entire other, if you can always count on the other party to vote in a block against it, then you're allowing 4 to 5 people to control whatever. So it doesn't matter even if you have 96%. So that is not a government that works. That is chaotic.
Last question.
Yeah. Okay, wait.
So
right, it's a challenge.
It almost feels existential. So if I were to stand back and say, well, here are the lessons we can glean from this. First of all, not everybody, some people do have a Matt Gaetz, in their midst. How do you deal with a character like that? Because you can't fire him, right? He doesn't have, here he is, he has a certain worldview, he's complicated. What do you do in that situation since he's now being vilified on the other side?
Right. Well, I mean, look, this is a real challenge, right? Because in his own party, ostensibly, who you could normally assume is on our team, he's not viewed as being trustworthy, and he doesn't trust them. I mean, think about one of the things that, credibility, reliability, and intimacy, all you want more of. That increases trust. Yep. The thing that erodes it is self-orientation. McCarthy is being portrayed, and has always been portrayed, as rather self-oriented. Mm-hmm. He was so unabashed, naked in his ambition to be the speaker.
Right.
That you could argue, people would say, well, I don't know if I can trust him because all he wants is that, no matter how long it lasts. So there's one is managing of himself, which is his own naked ambition, I think was leading in the front way too much. That would be one. The other thing I think is he was trying to do these deals, not in the dark of night, but he wasn't transparent at all about what he was trying to do. If you think you have groups, let's say you're a leader and it's truly a team that you're leading of people who don't directly work for you, which is what you have here. Not all that dissimilar to getting a group of senior partners together at McKinsey, I might add.
Okay. Right? Team arbitrage.
Right. Well, how do you get people together, and what do you have to have? A sense of purpose that at least lines up enough with individual purpose. How would you know that? You actually have to know what it is by asking them. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure he did that. Right? How do you make sure that everybody knows what your agenda is? If you surprise people, you're hitting on the credibility and reliability problem. You cannot surprise people who have at best a tenuous relationship with you. Yeah. So you have to signpost, friends, I'm going to go work with the Democrats. I don't believe a shutdown is in our best interest. It means I will give here, I will not give here. If that is anathema to a good portion of your crew, you either have to change what you're being transparent about or change your crew.
Tried to scuttle this process. He got at first 30 some odd people and then 40 some odd people to vote for him. And the McCarthy objective was to block any other candidate from being able to assume the speakership. And after a while, that became evident. McCarthy scuttled Scalise, he ultimately scuttled Jordan, he ultimately scuttled Emmer, and at the end of the day, the universal appeal of Mike Johnson was too strong for him to oppose. Hours ago, Congressman Molinaro of New York stood up and made a unanimous consent request after Mr. Emmer had pulled out for us at that exact moment to take a roll call vote on Mike Johnson. And guess which member of Congress objected to that unanimous consent request? Kevin McCarthy, because he hadn't figured out a way to sabotage Mike Johnson. Mike is the right guy. He is an inspirational leader. I'm so excited to go elect him Speaker of the House.
Can you talk a little bit more about why you think Johnson is the right fit for the job?
Yeah, he is really an oversight bulldog. I've been sitting next to Mike Johnson for 7 years on the House Judiciary Committee. We are no longer going to have the logjam for subpoenas and for oversight and for the rigorous work that our call demands. Also, as the Republican Study Committee chairman, he was a real fiscal hawk, and he showed how to put downward pressure on spending. And unlike even other candidates who I enthusiastically supported, Mike Johnson wants to move away from governing by continuing resolution, and he wants to have spending bills that address single issues. I don't think we're going to, you heard a lot of the Speaker Designate's discussion about Israel in his remarks, but you didn't hear this obsession to follow the Biden administration lashing Israel to Ukraine and forcing our goodwill toward Israel to carry the political anchor that is Ukraine funding at this time in the House Republican caucus. So those would be some of the things initially that are giving us a lot of hope. Great, thanks guys.
Did he mention in the room anything about, during his candidate pitch, anything about how he's going to handle spending or the Ukraine?
Yeah.
What was his pitch?
In his campaign for House Speaker, Mike Johnson indicated that he wanted to move the appropriations bills rather than try to govern long-term through continuing resolution. Other candidates favored long-term continuing resolutions. Mike Johnson wants the very single subject bills I've been fighting for. So
and
he
what
did
did you say
discuss
about
that.
Israel, Ukraine?
Expressed the immediate need to move Israel aid, but he did not express a necessity of lashing that Israel aid to Ukraine.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Have a good night.
They're having a discussion in there. When you become speaker, a lot of people won't know all the different rules. After 9/11, they created a system where you put names on a list if a case that you were no longer speaker for somebody to carry out that role until you elect a new speaker. It's about the continuity of government. I always believed the names I was putting on the list could carry out and keep government running until you elect a new speaker. There is a question, McGovern ran down to try to make a legal question. Some people legally say McHenry has that power, and some will say doesn't have all the power. So there was a debate in there, should we allow McHenry to have that power so we can deal with Israel and others and keep things working? I know the Democrats tried to make some legal thing against it. And that's the discussion we're having in there.
Can you
until we
explain
elect it.
specifically what happened with Matt Gaetz? Did you yell
Oh,
at him?
no. I was at the mic, I was speaking, and Matt Gaetz tried to interrupt, and so I told him to sit down, and he sat down.
What's your view
I think
on
it, no, I told him to sit down. I think the entire conference screamed at him. People are, listen, the whole country, I think, would scream at Matt Gaetz right now. Remember, it was a crazy eights led by Matt Gaetz and every single Democrat that put us into this situation. We've never been in this situation before, but how do you have 4% of your conference remove a speaker when 96% are there? This is why we're here. He had no plan afterwards. Now we have Israel at a war, questions whether Congress can act, questions where we'd be able to go to select a new speaker. I mean, it's a difficult situation driven by one person for his own personal beliefs, his own animosity towards me, and his concern about what's inside an ethics complaint that was filed before I was even speaker.
What is the support for the McHenry resolution to give him more powers, and would you need Democrats to come and help you?
Well, the question in there, we'd like to have all Republicans, but they get into the bunch of legal minds, whether they're or not. I just think we need to make sure government still runs.
And I think we should be having a resolution on the floor in support of Israel. I have a 5-point plan to support Israel, but the question right now is you can't do anything until you elect a speaker, and apparently there's not enough votes to elect a speaker.
Should Jim Jordan step down?
Look, it took me 15 times to win, so I don't question when someone keeps have the opportunity.
Do you think there's some?
Look, when I put McHenry's name down, it was my belief that if something happened to me, that McHenry could run the floor until we elected a new speaker. It was not my intention when I put a name down that they couldn't do anything. So why would you put a name down? When the president decides on a State of the Union who his designated survivor is, I think it's he or her intention that if something happens to everyone else, that person could carry on the continuity of government. If we provided these rules after 9/11, I believe it was the intent of Congress for that same reason to put a name down, and you put a number of names, that person could carry on the job if you fail to not be able to do the job.
So is there going to be a vote on this resolution?
I don't know if there's going to be a vote or not. You'll have to talk to Victor.
What are you
the question, why did I choose McHenry? There's a number of people I chose. It's in the order. I think from a Patrick McHenry, I wanted somebody who had been committee chairs. I wanted somebody that wasn't seeking the job because their role was to carry it out and put it. I wanted somebody that could work with all sides, and McHenry is ideal for all that. If you watch him, he's not seeking to be speaker. He believes in the continuity of government. He's chairman of a substantial committee. He understands the working. He's been here a number of years, so he understands how Congress works. He has respect on both sides of the aisle. He could carry out the job. Remember, when you're speaker, you don't determine whether the bill passes or not. The committees work on whether the bill comes before. You make sure government keeps working. It's shocking to me that all the Democrats and 8 of those crazies led by Gaetz would vote to literally stop one branch of government. Why would you do that? It makes no sense.
What are you telling members who are calling on Congressman Jordan to suspend his campaign?
That's a conversation with them. Look, I went 15 rounds in the process. And so he got the majority of votes inside the conference. He has the opportunity to go, but you all determine that. Steve decided not to go to the floor. I don't get in the middle of their races. They can determine whether they think they could get the votes or not.
Can I ask you, will a majority of House Republicans support this resolution, do you think?
I don't think they'll bring it to the floor unless they have the majority.
And do you think there is, and
I don't know. They're having a long
discussion.
discussion.
Is there still a possibility
that the path forward as far as if that resolution advances? Like, do you support keeping McHenry in place through the end of November, through January?
Well,
what do you think is the appropriate time frame if there is?
This is the uniqueness of the resolution. It says a certain time frame, or until you elect a new speaker. We could elect a new speaker tonight and then it'd be done with. I just think with what's going on in the world today, I don't like the idea that Gaetz could go out and shut down all of Congress and we can't act. As Americans, that's not right. And as the former speaker, I put a name on the list with the belief that that would never take place, that the continuity of government would continue. There is some legal question about that. I don't want that to happen. Then elect a new speaker, or let somebody continue to let us do the work for the American people. Look, we have men and women on aircraft carriers out in the Mediterranean. I don't want to question. I go back to this. I got removed from speaker because I kept government open and made sure the troops were being paid. I would do that again tomorrow. That our men and women in the military, that they're out there in the threat of what's going on, questioning whether they're going to make their house payment or their car payment, that should not be their problem at all. And look, if I'm going to lose that job because doing what's right, I'm going to do it each and every time. But I also believe when I put a name down, that person has the right to keep Congress moving until we elect a new speaker.
So how do you get to that point, to the continuity? I mean, if Democrats and some members don't think he has that ability to keep government open and keep government
then those people just want chaos. I mean, collectively in there, we've got to find a way to govern. Now when you ask me all those questions, could I get the things done during the week? We did pretty well, didn't we? You see, it's a pretty tough job.
Congressman, what's your sense of keeping the government funded? I mean, you've got concerned about they can just shut down the government. Well, are you concerned about funding the government through the end of the CR or after the CR expires?
You know how a CR works, right? So a CR means it's a continuing resolution. It's a stopgap measure that government is funded to a set date. So I lost my job as Speaker because I did that. So I believe in that. I believe in the troops. I believe in keeping our border agents funded. I believe in our ability to keep going. And there's some people who don't believe in that. I think that's wrong. But the more time we waste here, all that ability to be able to get our bill to secure the border, all that ability to eliminate wasteful spending, all that ability to end the wokeism, we're losing on. And that's why I don't understand this brilliant 8 people on what their plan was and what they thought they were going to achieve, because as I look every single day, we lose in that process, and that means America loses.
Is there an acknowledgement?
Yes.
You right now are the Republican who has had the most votes on the floor, the most votes to go to the floor. Is there any way that you could hear from 5 Democrats and put your name back in as a potential speaker?
Look, every single Democrat made a choice to bring chaos. Every single Democrat decided that this was the best way forward. What's interesting, though, is the leadership of Democrats had said something different the entire time I've been here since Boehner. So I guess they changed their mind.
They were really mad about your comments the Sunday after you kept the government
Oh,
open.
really? So they're mad I kept government open?
Well, now it's a couple weeks later.
Well, no,
you blame them. It's a couple weeks later.
Okay, that's a great question. So let's walk through that, since people have thin skin, okay? So I put a bill on the floor to keep government open, and they moved to adjourn. Then they moved to delay, and then they took a magic minute. But they were upset that I acknowledged they did that? I wonder if they should have this job if that upsets them. What do you think they say about me?
Yeah, but is there any way to put Humpty Dumpty back together again and you end up with the gavel?
Look, I think that stuff is probably past. They decided they wanted to shut down one branch of government. I'm trying to keep it open just for the same reason I fought to keep government. I had to roll them to keep government open for the troops. I'd do that again.
So if there's not a majority of support for the resolution to give McHenry more powers, is there a possibility that we
Look,
could keep?
I am no longer Speaker, so I'm not making that determination. So you have to ask those in leadership. Steve Scalise schedules the floor. You've got Patrick. You've got Emmer, and you've got Elise. They are better to answer that question.
Do you think Jordan should keep going forward?
Speaker, who should be negotiating things like Israel, continuing resolution, continued appropriation bills?
Great question.
Are you involved in this?
Nobody's involved in this, because that brilliant 8 people led by Gaetz, this was apparently their plan. I don't quite understand what that helps America for, what that helps the conservative cause. It's actually the reverse. I laid out a 5-point plan to be able to help Israel, but more importantly, help America. First and foremost, this Biden administration needs to change their appeasement. They should no longer pay for American hostages, and their first focus should be bring every single hostage back and make it very clear that we'll hold people accountable. Secondly, make sure Israel has all the ability and the resources they need. That's from medical supply to precision weapons to carry out what they do. Hamas has to be destroyed. We should also make sure that we stop what this administration has done, reverse back. The sanctions are there when it comes to Iranian oil. Iran has become stronger, financially secure, and able to fund more terrorism based upon this Biden administration of not enforcing the oil sanctions. When Biden came into office, Iran was only producing 400,000 barrels a day. Today, they're producing 3 million. How many billions of dollars do you think that is? Secondly, I would go about making sure we secure our border. I have been fighting this Biden administration ever since they opened the border up of how many people we're catching on the terrorist watch list. We don't know if there's any cells inside America. We watched what transpired in Congress just yesterday with people coming in. I mean, this is a dangerous situation of where we are, and we should reassess that. And then we should replace the Iranian oil with American oil. That'd be more American jobs, more economic strength here. And if you look at the foreign currency exchange, when Biden took over, Iran only had 4 billion. Today they have 70 billion. He has been stronger for the economy of Iran than he has for America.
So I mean, how do you get government back continuity-wise? I mean, McHenry's coming out saying he's not asking for more powers. He wants to be focused on electing a speaker. If the resolution doesn't go to the floor, I mean, how do you convince McHenry that he does have these powers?
Well, if the resolution went to the floor and passed, it would exactly do what I thought I was doing when we signed a piece of paper, to keep government running, and it would stay running until we elected a new speaker. Then the new speaker would come in.
Wouldn't McHenry have to come up with his own list of backups? And would you be willing to
If it passed, yeah, and then someone was afraid would they do a motion to vacate, I said, put me on the list, then they won't do a motion to vacate. We'll be fine.
Who's second? Who's second on the list?
It's a secret list. I'll tell you who's not on the list.
Matt Gaetz, not on the list.
If we were to follow up on my last question.
I bet America vote on that one.
Just in this scenario where McCarthy does have more powers, is he the point person negotiating with Democrats? Is it the speaker?
I think the best
Is it the former speaker? You have like these 3 speaker figures in the conference.
Okay, let me answer your question. The best thing for Republicans to do is to elect a speaker. That would solve all these problems. All right, I hope you all have a good day.
The speaker designated doesn't.
You are going to get Mike Johnson here. It looks like here. Take me through your thinking at this moment. This obviously, is this vindication for you?
Mike Johnson is a godly man. He is a thoughtful man. He understands the complexities of policy decisions. I serve with Mike Johnson not on just one committee, but on 2 committees, Judiciary and House Armed Services, so he understands foreign policy and military policy. And he's been my seatmate in the Judiciary Committee for 7 years, where I've seen how his tactical proficiency can really help us uproot some of the most weaponized and really unfortunate features of the Biden government.
I mean, there's going to be key issues that he's going to have to confront that McCarthy had to confront of funding the government. Would you be okay if he has to pass a short-term spending bill in mid-November?
Well, Mike Johnson just put out a plan to get rid of the French work week here in Washington and to go to Bayou work hours, where we're here even on weekends, even late at night, passing our appropriations bills. Mike Johnson just moments ago put out his plan on government funding, and you didn't even see the word continuing resolution in that plan. We're going to fund this government. We're going to fund Israel. We're going to fund our troops and our Border Patrol, but we're not going to do it by mashing all of those issues together in one up or down vote. We're going to address them in single subject legislation.
But if he's going to have to move on a short-term spending bill, if he does, will that be enough to oust him the way you ousted McCarthy?
Well, these aren't short-term spending bills.
Yeah, but he's going to have to. He's not going to by November 17th. If he's forced to move on a short-term spending bill to keep the government open, would you push to oust him?
No, and I don't expect that that's where we're going. And he's put out a plan that's in direct contravention to that. What we're looking at with Mike Johnson is a strategy to put pressure on the Senate to take up our bills. For example, we have over $3 billion in Iron Dome money in our state and foreign ops appropriations bill that we've passed, that the Senate could take up, could amend, could conference with us at any time. And that's a better way to do this than having continuing resolutions govern our country.
So you don't think he's going to do a continuing resolution at all?
He doesn't think he's going to do a continuing resolution based on the substance of the plan he put out. I wouldn't fault Speaker Johnson if we have to have some sort of bridge to those single subject bills, but that was never in the cards with Speaker McCarthy.
But that's what McCarthy exactly did.
No.
He had a bridge to try to do a big, longer bill.
There's a fundamental difference. Kevin McCarthy took 6 weeks off in August, which was the tell that he was never serious about single subject bills. When you're behind schedule, you don't take a 6-week vacation unless your goal is to ultimately truncate the process and get to a continuing resolution. Mike Johnson's goal is to get to single subject spending bills. Kevin McCarthy never had that goal. He might have said so, but like many things with Kevin McCarthy, it lacked truthfulness and sincerity.
But what if he's forced to agree to spending levels higher than, say the Fiscal Responsibility Act spending levels? Would you accept that under Speaker Johnson?
Oh, look, I understand in divided government, we have to negotiate these things with Biden and with the Senate. I've always said that. The question is what platform to use for that negotiation. I don't think we should be governing by omnibus or continuing resolution. Some of my colleagues just wanted to negotiate the features of that. So I'm sure I won't get a spending level as low as I would probably like it in divided government, but I think we can have more efficacy out of our spending if we have programmatic analysis and review, and you only get that with an amendatory process on single subject bills, not one big up or down vote on funding the government.
It just sounds like you're giving him a lot more leeway that you didn't give McCarthy.
I trust Mike Johnson, and I know Mike Johnson wants to achieve the goals I wanted to achieve. I didn't trust Kevin McCarthy because he wanted to achieve the goals that K Street wanted to achieve. There's a lot of hand-wringing and bedwetting among the lobbyists and the PAC bundlers because they do not have a Speaker of the House anymore that they own and control and can manipulate. Mike Johnson answers to God and the Constitution, And it's not a question of how much leeway to give him, it's accepting the realities of divided government, but we have to change the rules of the game. That's what Mike Johnson's going to do. He's going to really prioritize our single subject bills over whatever ornament one can hang on a continuing resolution. I think that's my
Okay, if he brings Ukraine aid to the floor, what would you do?
Well, I was heartened that last night when Mike Johnson gave his acceptance remarks, he talked about Israel, and we didn't hear so much about excessive involvement for the United States in figuring out who's going to run Crimea.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We are gathered here at the headwaters of the majestic Florida Everglades, and one thing's for sure, I prefer the swamps of the Sunshine State far more than the swamp of Washington, D.C. My amazing wife Ginger and I consider it a blessing from God to call Florida home. But more and more, it feels like Florida is the world's greatest refugee camp. We have tax refugees who love our constitutional prohibition against a personal income tax. We have climate refugees who enjoy our beautiful shimmering oceans and our warm, inviting sands. We have political refugees, too, from communist governments in Cuba, Venezuela, New York, and California. New York seems to be finding out that when you import all of the third world's problems, you don't live in a sanctuary, you live in an asylum. Now more New Yorkers than ever are finding their sanctuary in our beloved Florida, and we welcome them so long as they leave their Democrat voter registration card north of the Mason-Dixon line. And thanks to the people in this room, Florida's getting redder by the hour. We have the greatest leadership team in all of America for our state Republican Party. Our chairman, Christian Ziegler, and our vice chairman, Evan Power, do a phenomenal job keeping this state red. Now, as a lifelong Florida man, I can tell you I know swamps very well. To build golf courses and subdivisions and outlet malls and theme parks, I've seen many swamps drained, and I know of what I speak. Here's something I could share. The alligators and the rats and the snakes and the vermin and the lizards don't like it too much when you're draining that swamp, and when the water level comes down, they hiss and bite and rattle around a little crazy. Now, I know I have taken a little bit of criticism this past month. Even the Wall Street Journal led with this editorial headline: "The Gates of Republican Hell." Keep in mind, this is the first regime change the Wall Street Journal editorial board has ever opposed. Maybe they would have been happy if I'd have found an extremist Sunni Muslim to become House Speaker. I understand why some of the rhinos and establishment Republicans are upset. People like Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney used to be important. Now, they are leaving the governance of the Republican Party to the actual Republicans. Oh. For too many years, the Republican Party was controlled opposition. Amnesty for illegal immigrants, intervention overseas, and selling out to corporate America drove the agenda. Well, those days are over. The Make America Great Again movement is ascendant. Mike Johnson is House Speaker, and Donald John Trump will be the next President of the United States. And I'm not going anywhere. To my doubters, I have this question. Did people actually believe we were going to take power away from a corrupted person like Kevin McCarthy, and the swamp creatures would just like it? Did you expect them to pack up and move? The lobbyists who owned Kevin McCarthy were never going to thank us on the way out the door. They weren't eager to leave their mud holes in the Speaker's office, but an extermination was necessary. And when there's an extermination going on, it can get a little grisly. Sometimes you don't want to watch the extermination happen, but you know the job must be done. Florida swamp drainers often endure bites and scratches and venom. All I had to endure was a little bit of Mark Levin and Judge Jeanine. But you notice those Fox News hosts really do seem to like our new speaker. Funny how that works. I'm sure glad they like the result. Some people called me vile, crazy, an agent of chaos. And that was just the congressional Republicans. They said far worse about me than they ever did Jack Smith or Ali Mayorkas or Merrick Garland or Christopher Wray or even Joe Biden. And by the way, Joe Biden deserves impeachment and Hunter Biden deserves a damn subpoena. Oh no, those rhino Republicans were so mad at me, but my sin wasn't deficit spending the dollar away or opening the border or arresting my political opponents. I did something far worse. I demanded that Republican congressmen actually keep their word to Republican voters. I guess I define chaos a little differently. To me, chaos is no budget. Chaos is an unaccountable administrative state. Chaos is a weaponized federal agency, everything from the DOJ to the FBI to the ATF, and I would defund every last damn one of them if we don't get them back on the side of our people. Chaos is voting on funding the whole government all at once. Politicians not naming post offices or passing messaging bills for 22 days is not chaos. By electing Mike Johnson Speaker of the House, we will bring order out of the chaos of Washington, D.C. I know what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for budgets that balance. Our nation's debt right now is growing faster than our economy. We are jeopardizing America's future to fund wars and nonsense in the federal budget. We fund English language classes to professional transgender women makeup entrepreneurs in Nepal. We are borrowing money from China to fund transgender businesses in other parts of the world, and we do it while our leaders tell us that makes us stronger. My friends, America is not the world's police force, and America is not the world's piggy bank. There is no shame in wanting to put the people who live in this country first. I care more about the people in East Palestine, Ohio, than I care about some fake concept of Palestine in the Middle East. I care about what's going on in Maui, what's going on all across America, where liberal Democrats have let the people of our nation down. There is no excuse for not getting spending under control. The rampant spending that is behind this inflation is making life unaffordable for so many. Inflation has gotten so bad that foreign governments can no longer bribe Democrat senators with U.S. cash alone. They have to send gold bars just so that the bribes hold value. But it's our fellow Americans who are spending more than $700 a month more than they were just 2 years ago for the same goods and services. 61% of this country right now, including probably many of you, living paycheck to paycheck. But when the paycheck doesn't stretch for the pay period, more Americans are turning to credit cards. Our debt is driving up the APR on those credit cards, and we now see more delinquencies than at any other time in the last decade. This inflation crisis is happening because we have a corrupt system where money is spent without itemized review. Just imagine if your wife turned to you and said, "Quick, let's spend $100,000 right now for the next year." or we have no food. The budget process is like this because powerful people buy off politicians to have influence. Our chaos, our challenges are nothing more than their next lobbying contract. I had no choice but to make the change we made because of the challenges and the gravity of those challenges that we face. Joe Biden is sleepwalking us into 1 or 2 or 3 wars, all while soiling his pants on the way to meet the Pope. Trump gave us peace through strength, and Biden gives us war without winning. But all of this weirdness, he's been scratching and sniffing his way through the presidency. You deserve better. You gave the donations, you knocked the doors, you made the calls, and you elected a Republican House of Representatives. I figured it was about time we started acting like Republicans again. When I first ran for Congress, my campaign theme was Fight Washington, Restore America. Now, fighting Washington hasn't won me all that many friends in Congress. Far from it. I can't seem to keep a food tester. 3 died on me last week. But fighting Washington has won us a new conservative speaker. Fighting Washington has shown the swamp creatures that they don't win every time, and they're not going to keep getting away with breaking their promises and paying lip services to the true conservatives, making sure we win elections. Fighting Washington has restored some modicum of power back to we the people. And I'm just getting started. Back in January, joined by the outstanding Byron Donalds and the indomitable Anna Paulina Luna, we demanded institutional change. Changes like single-subject spending bills, a vote on congressional term limits, a vote on a balanced budget amendment, reduced spending to pre-COVID levels, and a full and complete release of the January 6 tapes. These are the things that conservatives agree on, but we have got to stop talking and start doing. Congressional leadership, they sat me down before all this and said, I just lacked patience. But it seemed more to me that they lacked courage. And now one of them lacks keys to the Speaker's office. I want to spend all of my time fighting Democrats and their radical destructive agenda. They break everything they touch. The economy, the border, even gender. They broke gender. If you would have told me that we would have these things going on today when I first got elected, I would have said you are crazy. But when Republicans keep acting like Democrats, I will be in the battle with you and I will fight them too. I oppose most regime change abroad, but it was necessary to conduct a little regime change here at home in the People's House. And I promised 2 things. We would have a speaker more honest and a speaker more conservative than the California lottery winner. Now, Florida alone is responsible for 4 additional Republican congressmen. Without those wins that we got here in Florida, Nancy Pelosi would still have power today. And then I did what I had to do. So I guess in a way, you could say that it was Florida that led to the firing of not 1, but 2 liberal California speakers. Mike Johnson is a great conservative. He is a proud Christian who cares about the Constitution. And we won't agree always, but the mainstream media is correct when they call Mike Johnson the most conservative speaker in history. Put another way, it was entirely worth it. This is a fresh start in Washington, and the lobbyists and the Uniparty are not happy about it. You know what? That's exactly how it should be. Our leaders should be beholden to the voters alone, not the foreign interests abroad, not the special interests here at home. And that is why I am the only Republican in the entire United States Congress who refuses all donations from federal lobbyists and political action committees. I work for you. I work for you alone, not them. Know this. Know this about power in Washington, D.C. You only get it if you take it. Folks can brandish the titles, get the big stabs in the fancy corner offices. They can even spend their time toiling on busy work masquerading as legislating. But the real power, the stuff that starts or stops wars, the stuff that will save or destroy economies, the stuff that will extend or end America's story, that power is more elusive. If you take nothing else from my remarks this evening, know this. Our destiny as America First conservatives demands that we wield the real power. The swamp loses sleep over votes for Speaker. You and I lose sleep over the 100,000 dead Americans poisoned by fentanyl. They're passionate about Ukraine's borders. I'm passionate about America's. They prefer a status quo that has destroyed this nation, and I want to go a new direction to save the country. Like Abraham Lincoln, I never claim that God is on my side. I humbly pray that I am on his. But when I saw Mike Johnson take that gavel and assume the speakership, I felt how many prayers in this country were answered. Still in D.C. today, they say I'm not a team player. What they don't understand is that it's all of you who are my team. I'm on Team America, not Team Globalist or Team UN or Team Ukraine. My team doesn't bend to the lobbyists or special interests. My team counts actual wins, not just how many players wear our jersey, and I need you on my team. So keep praying and keep fighting. Both will make you stronger and more useful to the greatest movement and the greatest nation in all of human history. And if you are willing to take some risk, endure some criticism, and put it all on the line, then come fight with me. Our battle does not guarantee comfort, more like blood, sweat, toil, and tears. But we will not merely endure political pain, we will dish it out. It's time to fill the political graveyards with our enemies, not our ideas. More victories are on the way. God bless Florida. I miss the Sunshine State each and every day. God bless America. Thank you for having my back, and let's go get them. Here's something I can share. The alligators and the rats and the snakes and the vermin and the lizards don't like it too much when you're draining that swamp, and when the water level comes down, they hiss and bite and rattle around a little crazy. Now, I know I have taken a little bit of criticism this past month. Even the Wall Street Journal led with this editorial headline: "The Gates of Republican Hell." Keep in mind, this is the first regime change the Wall Street Journal editorial board has ever opposed. Maybe they would have been happy if I'd have found an extremist Sunni Muslim to become House Speaker. I understand why some of the rhinos and establishment Republicans are upset. People like Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney used to be important. Now, they are leaving the governance of the Republican Party to the actual Republicans. Oh. For too many years, the Republican Party was controlled opposition. Amnesty for illegal immigrants, intervention overseas, and selling out to corporate America drove the agenda. Well, those days are over. The Make America Great Again movement is ascendant. Mike Johnson is House Speaker, and Donald John Trump will be the next President of the United States. And I'm not going anywhere. To my doubters, I have this question. Did people actually believe we were going to take power away from a corrupted person like Kevin McCarthy, and the swamp creatures would just like it? Did you expect them to pack up and move? The lobbyists who owned Kevin McCarthy were never going to thank us on the way out the door. They weren't eager to leave their mud holes in the Speaker's office, but an extermination was necessary. And when there's an extermination going on, it can get a little grisly. Sometimes you don't want to watch the extermination happen, but you know the job must be done.
Put your notifications on Do Not Disturb. Just text me just in case I don't have that number, but I'll be texting this one in case I need it.
walking and not looking.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Congressman Gaetz.
Thank you all so much. Oh my gosh. Thank you all so much for coming out. You know, in Washington, D.C., they sometimes ask me how I do the things I do. I say, you should meet my bosses back in Northwest Florida. Well, when I first ran for this job 7 years ago, I said I was running to fight Washington to restore the great promise of this country. And I'm hoping after the last few weeks, you still see I got a lot of fight left in me. We took on the swamp, and we won. But I had to tell some of those folks up in Washington, when you get to draining the swamp, sometimes the alligators and the snakes and the vermin, they don't like it too much. They hiss and holler and bite. Sometimes you got to endure a little venom to get the job done. Well, I let them know I'm a Florida man. We've drained some swamps before, and I know of what I speak. I want to take a moment. If you have served in our military, if you're an active duty veteran, raise your hand, stand up. Let us give you the honor you deserve right here in Northwest Florida. Thank you all so much. The greatest blessing, other than being the son of Don and Vicki Gaetz and knowing Jesus Christ in my heart, is being a member of this community. Because military families are not just a feature of Northwest Florida, they are the defining characteristic. And when the days get long and tough, I think I haven't been home in about 6 weeks until yesterday, I think of the sacrifice of those who put on the uniform and those who love them and those who send them into the fight. My sense is that this is a fighting district, and each and every day you deserve a fighting congressman. So here's what happened. I've been dying to get home to share with you the tales of the trail. In January, I had endured too much. I had seen that time after time, the politicians pass omnibus spending bills that are thousands of pages long. They give you about a day to read it, and then you have to take one up or down vote on the funding of the entire government all at once. And that has resulted in a nation sitting atop a $33 trillion debt, facing $2 trillion annual deficits. So you have to wonder, who would design a system like this? Would you ever run a family like this? We're going to spend all the money this year or none of it? Would you ever run a business this way? But very powerful people buy off politicians who accumulate influence, and then they expect favors in return for that. And the only way the favors they get can withstand any scrutiny is if they're tucked into some massive bill where if you don't vote for it, they're going to say you're not for the veterans or our troops or our seniors or the disabled or vulnerable people in our country, people we'd want to support. And so that's how they do it each and every year. And when we had a 4-seat majority, many said it would be the cause of unknown calamity. We would never be successful, but I saw a 4-seat majority as opportunity back at the beginning of this year to use leverage. What I've learned throughout the history of this country is that powerful people never give it away unless you take it. Okay? These corrupt influences are established for a reason, and it sometimes requires great political force and risk-taking in order to drive the outcomes that put the needs of the people before the corrupt. And so we said that if Speaker McCarthy wanted to take that gavel in January, there were certain things we were going to demand. Like, I don't know, we wanted 72 hours before the bills were presented in order to be able to read them. And they called us crazy when we asked for that. And then a big one to us is that we not spend so much money. Federal government spending increased 40% during COVID. 40%. So you would think when the emergency is over, you would be able to reduce some of that spending. But no, they just all want to keep their snouts down in the trough. They want to keep escalating the amount of money that they're printing so that each and every dollar you earn is worth less. So now we live in a time where in over 90% of counties in the United States of America, the average person on the average income cannot afford a home, cannot afford the American dream. More people are right now facing repossessions of autos than at any time in 15 years in this country. And we've got over 60% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. And when that paycheck doesn't quite get you to the next one, folks are using credit cards more and more, and you are seeing the APR on these credit cards skyrocket. And you're not getting any more for it. In America today, the average family is spending $700 more for the same goods and services that they got last year. And why is that happening? Because we have this corrupt system that allows money to be spent without any specific itemized review. And there's no agency of the federal government that wouldn't do good to have a little light shed on it, to go over program by program and see what's working and what's not. And so one of the key things we demanded were single subject spending bills. One issue at a time, one agency at a time, not all that lumped all together. I figured, when we do that, we're not going to win them all, my friends. I go up there to Washington, some of them are socialists, some of them are communists, some of them are throwing Hamas pep rallies in the middle of the Capitol building. So they don't all think like us all the time. But you know what? We got to be willing to have the vote and to force the issue and to put it before the people, and then the people can see if their representatives are actually representing them, or if they're taking the money from the lobbyists and the special interests to do corrupt things. And then you know what? Then we go work together and we defeat those people and we get the government we deserve. It doesn't happen any other way. So we were promised all those things. And then sure enough, before there are 12 appropriations bills we got to pass, before Congress took a 6-week vacation, we passed one of them. Just one of them. Now, not doing your work and heading off to vacation is not what our value set would allow here in Northwest Florida, and it is not what we should tolerate from the Congress of the United States. When I was home talking to folks, they said, Matt, we believed in you in January. We wanted those single subject bills. We were promised to vote on term limits. We were promised to vote on a balanced budget amendment. And we don't see those things happening, and we have eyes and ears, and we know what's going on. And so you told us about this motion to vacate, where if any one member wanted to call the question on the leader of the institution, they'd have the ability to bring that power to account. It is. Thank you. I want you to know, you as my bosses, as the people I literally work for, I want you to know I did not take this decision lightly. I prayed about it, I thought about it, I consulted with people, but ultimately, I didn't feel it would be fair for me to stand before you again, having not delivered on the promises that we made in January about institutional change. Whenever you do anything in politics that makes a difference, it involves a certain level of risk. Where I go to work each and every day, I walk underneath the murals of Jefferson and Madison and Adams and Washington. These men took enormous risk to carve this country out of a wilderness. In the worst days, in Valley Forge, when Congress and Washington were fighting and sending nasty letters back and forth to one another, Washington devised the plan in some of the most desperate of circumstances to cross the Delaware River and surprise the Hessians. That took risk, and it's the reason we have a country today.
So I knew there would be risk. I knew there was a possibility that maybe the Democrats would kind of like this McCarthy fella. And I let him know, I'm done owning him. So if y'all want to own him, you can own him. But it wouldn't be on Northwest Florida's representative that we were going to own him anymore. And it turns out they didn't want to own him either. Because the one thing we all had in common is that he had misrepresented things to everyone. And see, in Washington, when people tell lies, it's sort of impolite to call them on it. And to say that wasn't true, you said something different, and now I demand you account for the thing you had said. No. You're actually the impolite one, the reckless one, if you call them out on their lies. So we brought to that moment, and then, after McCarthy had been vacated, the fight was not over. I put out on every platform we have, and I certainly hope you follow me at Matt Gaetz anywhere on social media, that you follow our podcast, Firebrand, so that you get the news directly, not filtered by the mainstream media. And when we put out the information at that time, the fight wasn't over because we had to upgrade the position. My promise to all of you is that the Speaker of the House would be more conservative and more honest. And in Mike Johnson of Louisiana, I have fulfilled both of those commitments. Now, I would have taken Jim Jordan of Ohio if they'd have given it to me. And for a boy from the South to be for someone from a Big Ten state, that really took a lot. But during those votes for Jordan, you remember what the headline said? Matt Gaetz is full of chaos. Well, you know what? There's times when you can have constructive chaos and you can bring order out of chaos. And they said that, and then they said, well, you know, we'll never get someone better. Because here's what McCarthy was doing. Anytime when Jordan was put up, McCarthy tried to knife him. And he was successful. And then when Escalates was put up, knifed him too, knifed the next guy. And then there was this interesting moment where a moderate Republican from New York City got up and said, you know, Tom Emmer just lost, so instead of doing all over again, could we just raise our hands and see if anybody's got a problem with Mike Johnson? Could we do a roll call? He's an honest guy, a good guy, done good work for us, has shown leadership on the Republican team. And guess who objected and went crazy? Kevin McCarthy. And then you know what? Everyone on our Republican team saw that it was Kevin McCarthy who was sowing chaos and desperately trying to cling to power. And he was standing in the way of our team coming together and gelling. I can tell you, in the moment when we designated Mike Johnson, the first thing he called us all to do was pray. Because there is a power at work in this country that is stronger and more dispositive and more meaningful than any politician, from President of the United States down to our local government, and it is Almighty God. And then you know what? Mike Johnson said after that, we're getting to work on our appropriations bills. We're going to get these things up, and we're going to take amendment votes, and we're going to stay late if necessary and get the job done. It took 7 months to pass the first government funding bill under Kevin McCarthy. We passed our first one under Mike Johnson in 1 day. I'm not for lashing all these disparate agencies together where I got to vote for the woke Department of Education the same time I got to vote for our veterans and our roads and our health care. That is not a way we should behave, and it is the only true way we get accountability. In the coming days, I plan to meet with the Speaker to talk about those other commitments. Vote on a balanced budget amendment, vote on term limits, and a full release of the January 6th tapes to the public, unedited, unabridged. When every news agency out there was dragging me through the mud, saying every bad word about me you could possibly say, I looked in the moments in history where members of Congress had to stand up and fight for something that really mattered to them, and sometimes the consequences that come their way. Northwest Florida's greatest congressman was Bob Sykes. He's the reason we have Eglin Air Force Base. He's the reason we have I-10. Libraries and schools and roads are named after him all throughout our community. We got crossways with some of the folks in Washington one year, and they kicked him off all his committees. And then he came home and had a rally something like this and was overwhelmingly reelected to go back and serve the people of Northwest Florida. I looked a little further back. The only president to ever serve in the House of Representatives following their term, John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams finishes his term serves as president from 1825 to 1829. In 1830, he goes into the House of Representatives. And you weren't really supposed to be talking anything about slavery one way or the other in 1830 because it was a very tense issue. But you see, John Quincy Adams said, I'm going to make some people uncomfortable. I'm going to bring up my resolutions to point out the intolerability and inhumanity of slavery. He filed petitions on behalf of slaves. They called him a chaos agent. They threatened him with censure or expulsion. His colleagues started to hate him, but he went back to the floor time and again because he knew that his job was to stand up for people in this country and our fellow human beings and not to follow the script of a corrupt Washington, D.C. 14 years later, after he had spoken out against something called the gag rule, it was repealed, and thereafter we abolished slavery in this country because sometimes the people's house has to actually be for the people of our land and not for those who bribe and buy off our politicians. Now the path ahead requires some immediate work. And we got a few crises that are intersecting on us right now. You know, we got our border that's wide open. We have our great ally, Israel, that is under attack from people who do not even deserve to walk the planet Earth for what they have done. And we also have so many of our politicians want to send more of your money to Ukraine. I guess the first $115 billion wasn't enough. Now, I hope Ukraine wins. But I don't think that we should have to borrow money from China to send money to Ukraine to make us look stronger to China. That's foolish. Joe Biden stepped forward and he had already had agreement from Kevin McCarthy that they were going to force one vote on Israel, the border, and Ukraine all at once. Now, I imagine if we talked with everybody here in this group, there'd be folks who'd see those things a little different. And regardless of how you view those things, the border and Israel and Ukraine are very different challenges, and each one of them deserves a separate vote. I think that there is certainly a case to be made that we must stand with our ally Israel, but I don't think we should borrow money from China to do it. So I talked to the speaker today, and he had a pretty good idea about where to find the $14 billion to send to Israel, and the best place he could find it in the federal government was at the IRS. I love that idea. So we may put it to the Democrats and the senators and say, well, is it more important for you to maintain the tyranny of the IRS than to fight the tyranny of Hamas in Gaza? To get all of this work done, it requires incredible teamwork. And I've shared this story with many of you before. When I first went to D.C., I was told by some of the leadership that they'd been watching my votes, and they'd figured out that I wasn't a team player. And so it turns out I'm a great team player. It's just that all of you aren't my team. The people in Northwest Florida who I work for, who send me, that's my team, and you can never separate me from them. But it requires great team members at every level of government. We've got some terrific state legislators who are at a delegation meeting, or they would be here with us tonight. But in Santa Rosa County, we also have critical team members locally. I want, if you're here, wave, where's Ray Eddington and my man James Calkins? And if you don't mind me saying so, I think that we also have a tremendous opportunity in the Florida Senate. My first campaign was when I was 12 years old. I went door to door with my dad as he was running for the school board because he'd been He'd been to too many PTA meetings and spoken up, and so he ran for the school board. And after serving on the school board for a number of years, Don Gaetz was the first non-educator ever elected school superintendent in Okaloosa County history. And he brought our district to #1 in the state for 4 straight years. After that, my dad went on to serve as president of the Florida Senate, where I thank him every day I drive across that Pensacola Bridge and don't have to pay a toll. Thank you for that. So please join me in welcoming my father and the man on a return to the Florida Senate, Don Gaetz. So Dad, I guess before we get into everything that we got to work on together, how bad was Mom wearing you out when she was throwing dinner rolls at Fox News when they were talking bad about me?
What she did, she kept saying, we've got to get those people on the telephone. We've got to go see them. I want to put my finger in their face and tell them about my boy.
Please hold, Sean Hannity. I'm conferencing in my mother.
But I do have to say, Matt, that your mother, who's here today, Vicki, right in the back, behind the tree.
She doesn't like getting on a slope this close to water. Just gain some momentum and keep going.
Vicki and I are very, very glad, son, that you finally come out of your shell. It's been a while.
I hear you. Well, and I guess since you thanked your wife, I have to thank mine, Ginger Gaetz, my lovely wife. Dad, the reason I'm fighting so hard against this federal spending is I know it has a direct relationship to the increased costs people are paying. At the grocery store, when you borrow money to get a car or a house, it is related to federal spending. But here in Florida, life has gotten so good. People keep coming here from everywhere, and cost of living is rising, cost of insurance is rising. How do we make sure that we keep this state affordable for the people that made it the envy of the country?
Well, that's the issue. You know, we're the low-tax state, thank goodness, no income tax. We're the free state of Florida, thanks to 2 great governors and some good legislative leaders. So we're low-tax and we're free, but we're becoming the high interest rate state, the high housing rate state. There are people who want to work in this area. They want to be teachers. They want to be, first responders. They want to work in our merchandise departments of our stores, and they can't afford to live in the communities they work. So we're a high housing cost state, and obviously we're a high insurance rate state if you can get it. And the other thing is, we're, frankly, a high electric bill state. But my view is that a senator can't fix all of that, but a senator can do what a congressman has done, and that's fight like hell on all 3 of those issues. On housing, electric bills, and insurance rates. And that's what I plan to do if you let me come back to the Senate.
One entity that I don't know has been all that neighborly is Florida Power and Light. I've been very frustrated at the fact that a bunch of unelected folks on the Public Service Commission are approving rate increase after rate increase on our power and electric bills so that, for the environment, Florida Power and Light can go and cut down trees and put up a bunch of expensive solar. So then you pay the upfront costs of all of that, and then they get the long-term benefit of the infrastructure being in place. As far as I'm concerned, God bless this country with abundant fossil fuels, and the best carbon capture technology God created is a tree. You know what's pretty? A forest. You know what's ugly? A solar field.
That's right. And the same thing when you look at housing costs. You know, right now, if you had $350,000, you'd have a hard time buying a house. And when you talk about people who are on fixed incomes, people who want to come here and retire, people who are building their own families for the first time, educators, other people like that, they can't afford to live here. And if we can't afford to live here, if we can't afford to pay our electric bills, if we can't afford to get insurance, then we're the unaffordable Florida, and I want to make Florida affordable to live in.
No community can boast the richness that we enjoy from military families, from veterans. And one of the things that we're going to have to continue to work on is responsiveness from the VA, and then ensuring that military families and military spouses can get credentialed here and licensed here and work here, particularly in the area of childcare. You know, right now, one of the real challenges we have at our bases is getting people to go work in childcare. Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about our work together on licensing for military spouses and military families.
Matt and I served together in the legislature before he got downgraded to Congress. And one of the things that we decided to do was to press every possible boundary to make Florida more military friendly. And so one thing we did is we found out that if a military family moved here and, you know, the husband or wife had a teaching certificate, then it wasn't accepted by the state of Florida Department of Education. Or if they were a licensed plumber, or if they were a licensed architect, or if they were a licensed pharmacist, or if they were a licensed nurse, that those credentials earned in other states were not being accepted in Florida. So one of the things that we did together in the legislature, and we need to do a heck of a lot more of it if I get back in the Senate, is to make sure that we have accepting of all licensing from all states. As long as people are, you know, have the proper credentials, they ought to come to Florida and go to work in Florida, especially military families.
I want to talk about education policy too. We've got a school district here that's turning out some of the very best students that I get to nominate for service academies. I'll tell you, Navarre High School is punching above their weight. They're putting out some great Red Raiders and getting to nominate those folks for West Point and the Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy. It is the best perk of the job, if you're wondering. It is #1. But increasingly, the education system has turned at odds with many parents and many families, and it's become an adversarial relationship. I think a lot of that sickness and evil comes out of the Federal Department of Education in Washington, D.C. And, man, that guy's got an OG Gaetz sign. That's one from 2016. All right, you've been a fan a while. Half of these people didn't even live in Florida in 2016 when I made those signs. So everyone, you know, you see Republicans that take power and they forget about federalism and decentralizing the authorities that we think belong to the states. And so whether it was George W. Bush passing the No Child Left Behind law, or even some good-intentioned Republicans now wanting the Department of Education to do more and more and create paperwork for teachers, and you know, they're in a big building that they actually share with CNN. So if anything bad happens, I sure hope it's not to that building in Washington, D.C. But my policy on the federal level is not to strengthen the Federal Department of Education, not even to bend it to my wishes, but I have a one-sentence policy on education policy. We should abolish the Federal Department of Education and send all of that authority to our states and to our local school districts where parents can keep an eye on what's going on.
If you've got a child in school or if you've got a grandchild in school, you can reach out and touch, or you should be able to, your school board member. Because your school
The FBI will investigate you if you do. So
yeah, that's true.
He's saying reach out and touch figuratively, because you'll be on a watch list if otherwise.
Well, you'll be on a watch list with you and me. But, you know, if the decisions are made locally, if they're made at the school level, if they're made at the district level locally, then you can hold people accountable. You have a great school system in Santa Rosa County. When I was superintendent in Okaloosa, we learned from Santa Rosa County how to be a great school system. And you have one. but you're not going to get any help from Washington. All you're going to get is paperwork and mandates and trouble and federal dollars that are tied to strings that go all the way back to interest groups that you don't even want to hear about. So let's decentralize all of that, block grant the money back to the local school districts, and then you hold the teachers and the principals and the school board members responsible for the use of your money in educating your children. When I got to Washington, I never would have believed how almost every agency there has some feature of its mission that has been perverted to weaponize against the people. I used to think that the FBI and the CDC were the good guys. Yeah, and then one day the CDC wanted the powers of the CIA and ended up with the credibility of CNN. Even the post office. The post office has an internet covert operations program. That's the name of it. They couldn't even think of anything less creepy and weird than that. The post office literally spies on people's social media accounts to determine what your political preferences are, and then they store that information in a database. I'm not like some X-Files conspiracy theorist. This is what they've testified to in our open congressional hearings. And then, of course, we see the way the Justice Department has been turned into the enforcement wing of the Democratic Party. I believe in the upcoming government funding bill, Republicans should at least be forcing votes on defunding Jack Smith and ending the special counsel so that he can't do harm to our nation. We are going to be so much better in this fight with Mike Johnson as our House Speaker. Mike Johnson has litigated cases before the Supreme Court. He is a brilliant lawyer. He sat next to me on the Judiciary Committee for 7 years, so I'm assuming something is rubbed off, right? And we are going to be more driven, more focused, and more strategic under a guy who's a constitutional lawyer than the last guy who literally won the California lottery and then used the proceeds to buy a bakery. That wasn't the person we needed leading to oversight of the Biden crime family. These bank records show that foreign governments and people connected with them are sending money directly to folks in the Biden family. And when I hear people say, well, what if it's not just Joe, it's members of the family? The way you bribe a guy like Joe Biden is to give money to all his kids and grandkids. Anybody knows that. There was no Biden family business other than influence peddling and corruption. And frankly, the best defense they have is that a lot of people in Washington are doing it. I made the argument on the House floor that they've done so much to drive up inflation, you can no longer bribe Democrat senators with cash alone. You have to use gold bars to bribe the Democrat senators. But make no mistake, while it is personally gratifying to get these folks like Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland and John Durham and the ATF director in front of us to ask, so that I can ask questions and they can be exposed for what they're doing. You know what they do on most days? They smile, they laugh, they go back to their agency, they cash the check that Congress sends them, and they keep doing that work. That's why changing the way we're doing business in Washington is so important. Right here in our community, the ATF is targeting federal firearm licensees who are selling the guns that allow us to preserve our Second Amendment rights. I went to a blue state recently and I asked one of the licensees, well, do you get harassed by the ATF? They said, oh no, because our state gun laws are so repressive, the ATF just focuses on the red states. And they go to places like our community where we value our freedom and our self-defense, and they go and harass people. So I'm done just yelling at them and screaming at them. My dad told me a saying in our family that goes back generations. Don't tell me what your values are. Show me your checkbook and your calendar, and I can tell what your values are. And it's time to cut off the money to these weaponized agencies of government. Judge us by that. Do we keep sending them the check? I got to ask you, Matt, if you remember, when you and I served in the legislature, you were chairman of one of the Justice Committees in the House of Representatives in Tallahassee. And there was a big effort. They brought in all kinds of people. They brought in a lot of African-American leaders. They brought in people from other states. And they were going to repeal, or they were going to weaken, or they were going to water down the stand your ground law that you and I fought so hard to get into Florida law. And Matt was chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and he had to face down all these people. Tell them what you did.
I told them they could have all the debates they wanted, and at the end, we were not going to change one damn comma of the Florida Stand Your Ground law. And sometimes folks ask me, these members of Congress from other states and jurisdictions, they say, well, how can you just go have town hall meetings and rallies out in the open? Aren't you worried someone would come there and do harm? And I said, well, where I'm from, we believe in the Second Amendment, not as an esoteric theory, but as a way of life. And it has a tendency to keep everyone real polite. Real polite. Look, my friends, we are in this fight together. That's why I've invited you here tonight on a day God couldn't have made any better for us. And in those tough moments in Washington, I can barely even keep a food tester employed. I had 3 die on me last week. And I go into those rooms, and sometimes they hate me, and are mad at me, and are cussing me. But what sustains me is the courage that I see come through this community, and it is your prayers. Ginger and I cannot thank you enough for praying for me, for fighting for me, and for having my back. I am only able to do what we are able to do to change Washington because I know you want that change. If you wanted somebody to just go up there and go along to get along, you could have sent somebody else. Other people would have done that job for you. The job I'm doing for you is to take on these systems, to force them to account, because that is the only way we are going to put the needs of our people first. And I know that promise still exists. At every one of these rallies we do, there'll inevitably be somebody that'll come up to me and say, do we even have hope? Is the nation lost? Can we save it from the path we are on? But when I see the groups out there who are resisting lockdowns, who are fighting back against vaccine mandates, we've got some volunteers who even register voters at the gas station when people are worried about what Biden's forcing them to pay at the pump. I know that the spirit and the heart of this country remains strong, and the beating heart of patriotism is right here in Northwest Florida. I can't thank you enough. I know we've got more to do, and guess what? They'll be coming for me. You know that, right? Oh, somebody will pop up out of nowhere to attack me and lie about me, but I've let them all know in Washington, D.C., if you jump over the fence into Northwest Florida, you're into my backyard, and I got backup for days. Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for fighting alongside my dad and I. Thank you to James Calkins, to Ray Eddington, my dear friends in local government. Let's go get them.
The witness that said it looked like there was plenty of room for you to walk, and that you intentionally hit him.
There is, okay, not a place. Show me a reporter who saw that. Call
Claudia
Bruce
Gonzalez
Westerman.
at NPR
Okay, well, ask
said
Bruce
that.
Westerman. No, I did not go up. If I would hit somebody, they would know I hit him.
He said you hit him. He said he was in pain that you hit him so hard.
Come on now.
That's what he said.
That's powerful.
Matt Gaetz has put
Congressman Gaetz wrote that you pushed him twice while he was in Congress in the chamber.
When have I pushed him?
Kinzinger said he was in the back railing once and you elbowed him and pushed
You
him.
said
and then-
Gaetz.
Kinzinger.
Oh, no, I don't know about Kinzinger.
Congressman Gaetz, though, is filing or submitting a complaint to the Ethics Committee over this issue. Do you have any response to Congressman Gaetz?
No, I think ethics is a good place for Gaetz to be.
So I mean, Burchett said that you're the kind of guy, this is his words, as a kid would throw a rock and then go hide under his mom's skirt. That was his exact words. What's your response?
That's not who I am.
Just